wondered what kind of psychological warfare is quietly unfolding right behind the manicured lawns and, perfectly painted front doors of your neighborhood?
Oh, absolutely. It's always the quiet streets that hide the most, right?
Exactly. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a fascinating piece of contemporary fiction that just completely strips away that polished facade of suburban life.
Yeah, and our mission here is really to unpack the intricate mechanics of human behavior.
Yeah.
We're looking at the secrets we hide from our closest neighbors and really the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone see the messy reality behind our curated lives.
It's so relatable, and we drop straight into the visceral setting of North London. It is the middle of a brutal, just relentless 6-week summer heat wave.
Oh, you can almost feel it, just that heavy, oppressive heat.
Right. And right in the center of this stifling environment, we meet our protagonist, Sophie Brennan. She is hiding, literally hiding in a lukewarm children's paddling pool in her back garden.
Which is such a brilliant image. The imagery the author uses here isn't just about the weather,
Yeah.
It's a really profound reflection of her own internal decay.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Well, the heat really functions as a physical manifestation of her stagnation. We find Sophie just sitting there, staring at her own feet. She's wearing this coral-colored nail polish that is like weeks old and flaking off her toes.
Oh, the flaking nail polish, such a specific detail.
Exactly. And there's a dead fly floating in the tepid water right next to her hand. She's squeezed into a faded, spotty bikini that is noticeably too small for her now.
And she has a cold can of cola pressed against her forehead, right, just in this desperate bid for relief.
Yeah, and this isn't just a picture of someone trying to cool down. This is the portrait of a woman experiencing absolute, unadulterated lethargy. She is paralyzed by a creeping sense of failure.
The sensory details there, the peeling polish, the dead fly, they operate as these undeniable markers of neglect.
They are the physical evidence of things just left completely unattended.
Right, because Sophie's environment is mirroring her mental state. She is consumed by profound guilt. She's a freelance writer, but she hasn't managed to write a single word all day.
Not one word. And she's acutely aware of her own inertia. She's stuck in this chaotic domestic life with her husband, Alan, who he runs a building company, and their two young kids, Tom and Katie.
And her house reflects that chaos, right?
Oh, totally. The lawn is dying, the plants are withered because she just keeps forgetting to water them, and the patio is strewn with discarded plastic toys.
She knows she should clean it up. She knows she should open her laptop, but she's utterly paralyzed. And then, in that precise moment of vulnerability, this auditory intrusion shatters her isolation.
Yeah, the arrival of the new neighbors, it acts as this massive catalyst.
It breaks the silence.
Exactly. The heavy, stagnant air is suddenly pierced by the sound of flip-flops slapping against the patio next door.
And then a voice, right?
Yeah, a male voice with a really distinct northern accent rings out, just exclaiming, "Christ on a bike, it's hot!"
Such a great line.
And that's followed immediately by the sharp, recognizable hiss and pop of a carbonated bottle being opened.
Sophie's reaction to this completely mundane event is incredibly telling. She freezes. She stays absolutely motionless in that lukewarm water, allowing her skin to prune up.
She's terrified.
Yes, she's gripped by this intense fear that if she moves or even breathes too heavily, these strangers are going to know she's listening.
Which taps into this deeply primal, universal human instinct,
The voyeurism instinct.
Exactly. It's the intense desire to observe our surroundings without the liability of being observed in return.
Think about it. It's the sociological equivalent of watching a reality television show, but the screen is just a crack in your own garden fence.
That's a perfect way to put it. You crave the narrative. You want to ingest the drama and the granular details of other people's lives, but you demand zero active participation.
Or social risk. You don't want any of the messiness of actually interacting with them.
Right. And this inherent voyeurism, it spikes dramatically when we feel unmoored in our own existence.
Which Sophie absolutely does.
Completely. Her life currently lacks structure and forward momentum. So eavesdropping on the strangers moving in next door, it provides her with a fresh external narrative to focus on.
It's an escape hatch.
Yeah. It allows her to temporarily vacate her own failing career, her dead plants, and all her mounting insecurities. She is substituting the narrative of their lives for the terrifying blank page of her own.
Which explains her immediate pivot to action. She stealthily escapes the paddling pool, creeps inside the house, and fires off a text to her husband, basically anointing herself Detective Brennan.
I love that. Detective Brennan on the case.
She alerts Alan that the new neighbors have arrived and insists they need to run a full debrief over a curry that evening.
And the resulting dynamic between Sophie and Alan over dinner really illuminates a crucial architectural divide in modern relationships.
How so?
Well, think about Alan. He spends his days running a highly demanding building company. He manages complex logistics, demanding clients, the whole chaotic environment of construction sites.
So he needs a break when he gets home.
Exactly. To preserve his sanity, he enforces this rigid 3-mile no-work zone around their home. For him, the domestic space is an impenetrable sanctuary. The psychological boundary is ironclad.
So new neighbors are just whatever to him.
Yeah, the arrival of new people next door is entirely trivial to his reality. He simply wants to eat his korma in peace and decompress by watching 90s comedy shows.
While Sophie is practically vibrating with the urge to gossip and analyze every scrap of information she gathered.
Because for Sophie, the geographical boundaries are entirely blurred. Her neighborhood isn't a retreat from the world. It is her entire universe.
Right, because she transitioned from being a national newspaper reporter, constantly traveling and aggressively chasing breaking stories, to utilizing an old dressing table as a makeshift desk.
Her kitchen now functions as a staff room, for one. Her home is simultaneously her office, her social nexus, and her family environment.
She lacks the luxury of Alan's compartmentalization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, the people moving in next door are not merely neighbors. They are entirely new, unpredictable variables being introduced into her primary ecosystem.
But let's look closely at her motivations, though, because the narrative frames her as adopting this fun, inquisitive Detective Brennan persona, but the reality is she is utilizing massive avoidance techniques.
Oh, massive.
She is actively choosing this distraction over her responsibilities. She literally apologizes to her closed laptop as she walks past it.
It's hilarious, but so sad.
Right. This isn't just a quirky neighborhood interest. It is top-tier procrastination designed to insulate her from the reality of her professional decline.
Well, procrastination is rarely about near-time mismanagement,
Yeah.
It's almost always a mechanism for emotional regulation.
That is so true.
The intense focus on the neighbors is a psychological shield against a much deeper existential career anxiety. Sophie stepped away from journalism because the demanding hours were entirely incompatible with the realities of raising her children.
And then she spent a period doing admin for Alan's business during a recession just to keep them afloat.
Right. And now, attempting to re-enter the workforce as a freelance writer, she finds the landscape unrecognizable. The industry has drastically evolved, compensation has plummeted, and she feels fundamentally obsolete.
So throwing her energy into investigating the neighbors is really an act of self-preservation.
Exactly. It is significantly less painful to play amateur detective than to confront the paralyzing thought that her professional identity might be permanently extinguished.
That structural shift in her identity makes her subsequent actions entirely logical. The very next morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, Sophie leans entirely into this new distraction.
She doesn't waste a second.
Energized by the prospect of a new narrative, she marches right over to the new neighbor's house. And the author provides a brilliant detail here. She goes barefoot, pulling her 2 young children along, clutching a cheap bottle of Prosecco and a welcome card.
She is just brimming with this chaotic, slightly frayed neighborly enthusiasm.
And in a masterful narrative pivot, the perspective abruptly shifts.
It's quite jarring, actually.
It really is. We are violently pulled out of Sophie's chaotic but comfortable reality and plunged directly into the tightly wound psychological state of Angie Taylor, the woman opening the door.
The juxtaposition is just incredible. If Sophie represents authentic, slightly unraveled domesticity, Angie is operating under an entirely different taxonomy of pressure.
Because Angie is not just a working mother.
Right. She is a high-flying criminal law solicitor.
Okay.
She is managing not 2, but 4 children. Benji, Indy, Ellie, and Freddie. And as she greets Sophie, we realize that beneath her composed exterior, she is stretched to the absolute breaking point.
Angie is drowning in the cognitive dissonance of her current situation. She has just uprooted her family from a beloved, comfortable home in the affluent area of Greenwich, South London.
And relocated them to this dilapidated fixer-upper, intentionally.
And the text is unsparing in its description of the new environment, right? Dark green carpets, an archaic avocado-colored bathroom suite.
Peeling wallpaper.
Yeah, and ominous, spreading, damp patches in the living room. It is an environment of total disorder, fundamentally at odds with the control she requires in her professional life.
But right in the middle of this stressful initial encounter, Angie's husband, Jack, breezes into the room.
Typical Jack.
He jokingly tells Sophie that Angie is Superwoman, adding that they just haven't managed to unpack the box where she hides her cape yet.
Ouch.
Right. Angie laughs the comment off and politely demurs, but the text makes it agonizingly clear just how crushing the weight of that specific label is to her.
Because the superwoman archetype is one of the most toxic compliments a high-achieving woman can receive.
It's presented as an accolade, but it functions as a rigid, unforgiving expectation. It is a form of identity foreclosure.
She's trapped in it.
Yes. Angie is trapped in this high-functioning persona. She is expected to seamlessly navigate the grueling partner track at a law firm, manage the emotional and logistical needs of 4 children, and single-handedly orchestrate this massive domestic upheaval.
So when Sophie departs, Angie's reaction is deeply pragmatic. She mentally categorizes the gifted Prosecco as cheap and cheerful, instantly shoving it aside so she can resume the Sisyphean task of unpacking boxes.
And amidst this endless unpacking in a chaotic, dilapidated kitchen, she unearths a deeply specific object.
Oh, the bowl.
The bowl, a large, incredibly dusty crystal salad bowl. It was a wedding gift from a distant relative over a decade ago.
We all know this exact type of object. It is heavy, entirely impractical, and usually relegated to the darkest corner of a high cupboard.
Exactly. It is profoundly mundane. Yet in this specific moment, holding this heavy crystal in this unfamiliar, damp-smelling house, the bowl suddenly acquires a monumental psychological weight.
The bowl undergoes a metamorphosis from simple glassware to a profound psychological anchor.
That's spot on. The concept of anchoring in behavioral psychology often involves using physical artifacts to stabilize ourselves during periods of extreme cognitive dissonance or environmental upheaval.
Because the narrative explicitly notes that Angie harbors no actual affection for the bowl's aesthetic. She doesn't even like it.
No, not at all. However, as she holds it, she engages in this silent, intense debate. Does she bury it back in a cardboard box, effectively hiding it away in this new life? Or does she wash it and place it on prominent display as an emblem of their shared history?
And she makes the deliberate choice to wash it. She leaves it on the counter to dry, deciding she will use it to display fruit. It's a small, almost defiant action that feels less about interior decoration and much more about trying to convince herself of a specific narrative.
She is engaging in a desperate act of manifestation.
Yes.
The bowl represents the weight of her marital promises and her original intent. By elevating this neglected object to a place of prominence, she is physically constructing a monument to her commitment to Jack and to the terrifying new reality they are attempting to forge.
When everything around her, the peeling wallpaper, the avocado bathroom, the chaotic boxes, feels disjointed and fundamentally wrong, the heavy crystal bowl serves as a tangible, desperately needed assertion of order and continuity.
Because the chaos is not limited to the physical architecture of the house. The internal family dynamics are equally volatile.
Oh, the kids. Shortly after the incident with the bowl, the children arrive from their grandparents' house.
And instantly, the environment evolves into a fierce territorial dispute over bedroom assignments.
Of course it does.
10-year-old Indy, who has seemingly transitioned into a stereotypical, highly combative teenager overnight, is fiercely sulking. She is twisting her hair in furious agitation because she had been informed she must share a cramped room with her younger sister Ellie until the indefinite loft conversion is complete.
Indy's localized anger serves as a microcosm for the larger unspoken tensions radiating through the family.
Angie manages the conflict with the practiced, chilling authority of a seasoned criminal lawyer. She simply locks eyes with Indy and stares her down until the child capitulates.
But beneath that ironclad exterior, Angie's internal monologue is spiraling. She is quietly tormented by doubt. Did she commit a catastrophic error by severing her children from their established support network and friends in Greenwich?
Will anyone from their old life actually endure the commute to visit them in this dilapidated North London project?
And this internal panic points us directly toward the central mystery of the narrative. The author buries a critical detail within Angie's internal monologue, and it requires careful attention.
Yes, this is huge.
Angie has constructed a perfectly logical, universally acceptable narrative for the move. She tells Sophie, she tells her colleagues, she tells her friends from Greenwich that they relocated to Finchley to be in closer proximity to her ailing mother, Patricia.
Which is a socially bulletproof justification. No one questions a daughter moving to care for a sick parent.
But the text explicitly states that this is only a partial truth. It's a convenient cover story for a much darker catalyst.
This is where the structural integrity of their marriage is called into question. The narrative reveals that this relocation was not a mutual decision born of familial duty.
No, it wasn't.
It was, quote, a demand that Angie made. It was a non-negotiable ultimatum designed as an opportunity to put the past behind them.
And most crucially, the text specifies that it was a demand Jack had absolutely no choice but to accept.
Think about the last time you had to justify a major, highly disruptive life choice to your extended social circle.
You almost certainly offered them the polished, hyperlogical rationale. You moved for the superior school districts, you changed jobs for the commute, you needed a bigger garden.
Right. What you likely concealed was the messy, emotionally volatile, deeply uncomfortable reality that actually forced your hand.
There is a psychological explosive buried deep in the foundation of this fixer-upper, and Jack and Angie are simply trying to plaster over the cracks and build an extension on top of it.
This hidden catalyst casts a long, suffocating shadow over every interaction they have. When Jack casually reassures her that the renovations will be fine, or when Angie deliberately places that heavy crystal bowl on the granite worktop, they are not communicating about real estate or interior design.
They are communicating about survival.
Exactly. They are constantly navigating the silent aftermath of whatever catastrophic incident necessitated this mandatory geographic cure.
And the fallacy of the geographic cure, of course, is the belief that changing your physical coordinates will somehow resolve your internal or relational traumas.
To comprehend how their dynamic reached this incredibly fragile, high-stakes precipice, the narrative pulls us backward in time.
We transition away from Angie standing anxiously amidst the cardboard boxes of the fixer-upper, retreating over a decade to explore their origin story.
We move to the tampon aisle confession.
The famous tampon aisle. While it seems like a stark chronological leap, examining the foundational mechanics of their attraction is vital to understanding the current imbalance of power and emotional labor in their marriage.
Their dynamic during their university days at Durham establishes a classic, almost archetypal dichotomy. Jack was universally known as Jack the Jock.
He was the impossibly handsome, effortlessly charming captain of the university football team.
He was the center of gravity in their social sphere, the guy who left a trail of swooning, eventually heartbroken girls in his wake as his attention inevitably wandered.
And Angie, she occupied the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Angie's psychology at this stage is a masterclass in defensive pessimism and hyperfocus.
She was raised by a single mother, Patricia, who instilled a relentless, unforgiving mantra into her daughter's psyche.
What was it?
That women, particularly women without existing safety nets, must work twice as hard as men simply to secure a seat at the table.
So Angie did not attend an elite university to participate in the social theater or to navigate romantic entanglements. She was there with singular, lethal intent to secure a first-class degree in law and guarantee her financial independence.
Yet, they inexplicably gravitated toward one another. They shared a law course, and Jack quickly discovered that beneath her severe exterior, Angie was the only person he genuinely enjoyed debating with.
He sought her out for what he deemed the meaty stuff. Intense discussions regarding politics, historical precedent, and religious philosophy.
They forged genuine friendship, cementing it with standing Thursday lunches.
But Angie, true to her pragmatic programming, drew a severe psychological boundary. She freely admits in her internal monologue that she harbored a massive crush on him. I mean, it's a natural reaction to his charisma.
Of course.
But she logically deduced that she did not fit the physical or social profile of his typical conquests. She absolutely refused to allow herself to become another weeping casualty of Jack the Jock.
Consequently, she brutally suppressed her emotions. They maintained a strictly platonic dynamic, eventually graduated, and completely lost contact.
This period perfectly illustrates Angie's profound reliance on control. She successfully commodified her own romantic feelings, packaging them away to protect her overarching ambition.
However, the true test of this emotional suppression occurs years later, when the safety of physical distance is abruptly removed during a chance encounter in London.
The mechanics of their reunion feel deliberately cinematic. Angie, now a highly stressed, chronically overworked trainee solicitor, is ordering her standard black coffee in a cafe when she hears a voice ask, "Is that you, Ange?"
And she turns, and there he is, but the context has shifted dramatically. Jack had abandoned his legal studies, retreated to Manchester, and eventually secured a low-level job as a television runner in London.
He is entirely unmoored in the city, lacking a social network. And Angie instinctively steps in, offering to help him navigate his new environment.
The velocity at which their old dynamic resurfaces is staggering. They immediately fall into a pattern of constant contact. He messages her daily. They meet up continually.
Yet, Angie remains imprisoned by her own defensive pessimism. She actively downplays the intensity of their connection to her friends, constantly reiterating the protective caveat. We're just friends. He has a girlfriend back in Manchester.
She is existing in a state of agonizing emotional limbo. She desperately desires a romantic reality with him while vehemently refusing to acknowledge the possibility, terrified of the vulnerability it would require.
This unsustainable tension finally detonates during a critical Friday night social gathering. Angie has spent the entire week anticipating meeting Jack and his new television colleagues for drinks.
She invests significant time and energy preparing. She rushes to the office bathroom to meticulously apply makeup and fix her hair.
However, upon arriving at the pub, the reality violently clashes with her expectations. Jack is in a foul, uncommunicative mood.
He is effectively giving her the cold shoulder, radiating hostility.
For someone as deeply analytical and controlling as Angie, this sudden, inexplicable shift in his behavior is profoundly destabilizing. She cannot parse the data.
Right, so feeling publicly rejected and internally humiliated, she redirects her attention. She engages in conversation with one of Jack's older colleagues, a man named Harry.
And Harry is making his romantic interest in her exceedingly obvious.
They fall into an easy, flirtatious rhythm. And all the while, Angie is acutely aware of Jack sitting across the table, scowling darkly and aggressively consuming pints of beer.
Finally, Angie's pragmatism overrides her patience. She orchestrates a physical removal from the audience, dragging Jack toward the bar under the guise of ordering another round, and directly confronts his hostility.
She demands an explanation for his atrocious behavior.
And Jack, his usual easygoing demeanor entirely dissolved by a volatile mixture of alcohol and intense jealousy, finally breaks protocol.
He aggressively points out Harry's obvious attraction to her, demanding to know if the feeling is mutual.
When Angie, entirely bewildered, asks why he possibly cares about her romantic prospects, Jack detonates the emotional bomb. He states, plainly and angrily, "Because I love you."
Angie's immediate reaction is the most revealing aspect of her character architecture. Internally, the text describes her as erupting with a profound, almost dizzying joy.
But externally,
Her pragmatic defense mechanisms instantly deploy. She physically places her hand flat against his chest, literally barricading herself against his attempt to kiss her.
she tells him dismissively, "Oh, come off it, Jack, you're drunk."
She orders him to go home and sleep it off. She is absolutely terrified that his confession is merely a byproduct of alcohol and wounded male ego, and she refuses to let her guard down until she has empirical proof of his sincerity.
This intense refusal to surrender control perfectly sets the stage for the climax in the supermarket the following morning. This scene is fundamentally crucial because it strips away all cinematic romance and grounds their relationship in the gritty, unavoidable realities of domestic life.
It is an incredible sequence. The following morning, Jack appears at the door of her flat. He is clutching a bouquet of flowers, radiating sheepish anxiety.
Angie is gripped by the terrifying conviction that he has come to retract his drunken confession.
To maintain her protective armor, she abruptly announces she was just leaving to do her weekly grocery shopping.
But instead of leaving, Jack insists on accompanying her. What follows is an agonizing, intensely silent 10-minute march to a local Morrison supermarket.
The narrative brilliance here lies in the extreme contrast between the immense emotional stakes of the conversation and the hyper-mundane, unromantic setting they are forced to navigate.
They grab a plastic shopping basket, and Angie, operating on pure anxious adrenaline, marches directly into the toiletries aisle to purchase tampons.
She is utterly mortified that the man she is desperately in love with is silently shadowing her past feminine hygiene products.
But it is precisely here, bathed in the unforgiving fluorescent lights, sandwiched between the panty liners and the cotton pads, that Jack finally makes his definitive stand.
He acknowledges his inebriation the previous night, but insists that the visceral jealousy he experienced forced him to confront his own cowardice. He states unequivocally that he meant every word.
And when Angie, still grasping for logical objections, reminds him of the girlfriend in Manchester, Jack reveals that he completely severed that relationship via a phone call that very morning.
And the culmination of this immense emotional breakthrough is delivered with a perfectly timed, deeply grounded punchline. They finally kiss right there in the aisle.
A passing shopper aggressively yells at them to get a room.
Angie, flushed and overwhelmed, asks if they should abandon the shopping and leave. Jack pauses, looks at her and replies, Actually, I really need some fish fingers.
It perfectly deflates the tension. Although he ultimately abandons the frozen food aisle to return to her flat, that specific line about the fish fingers anchors their romance in reality.
It signals that their relationship will exist within the parameters of normal, messy human existence.
However, the charm of that origin story is brutally undercut by a scene that occurs 3 years later on their wedding night.
This specific detail fundamentally recontextualizes the entire power dynamic of their marriage.
We must analyze this moment closely because it exposes the severe asymmetry in their emotional labor. Fast forward 3 years. They have executed a massive, joyous, exhausting wedding celebration. The reception continues until 6 in the morning.
Angie is vibrating with an unprecedented level of happiness and security. They finally retreat to their dark hotel room.
Angie, slightly intoxicated by champagne and the overwhelming reality of her commitment, decides to finally relinquish her final piece of armor.
She turns to Jack in the darkness, reaches out to stroke his arm, and whispers a confession she has guarded with her life since she was 18 years old. She tells him, with total vulnerability, "I've loved you from the very minute I met you, Jack. I've always loved you."
She is laying her absolute soul bare. She is revealing a decade of hidden longing, offering him the ultimate confirmation of her devotion.
She lies there in the dark, waiting for the impact of her words to register. She anticipates a profound emotional reaction, a moment of mutual realization regarding the depth and history of their connection. And what is his response?
Absolute silence.
Wow.
He is already fast asleep. The steady, rhythmic sound of his breathing is the only answer she receives to the most vulnerable admission of her life.
It is a devastating narrative detail. How does this single moment define the architecture of their marriage moving forward?
It acts as the blueprint for their tragedy of differing depths. Angie is a creature of profound intensity. She is a deep-thinking, strategic planner who carries the psychological weight of the world on her shoulders.
She overanalyzes every variable.
Exactly. She fiercely guards her emotional interior, and when she finally commits to love, it is a staggering, all-encompassing, almost terrifying investment.
Jack, conversely, is a genuinely decent human being, but his existence is fundamentally surface level.
He is easygoing, he is charming, and he processes life exactly as it presents itself to him. He's the exact type of man who can peacefully fall unconscious while his new wife delivers a soul-bearing revelation simply because his body was tired.
This is not an act of malice or deliberate cruelty on Jack's part. It is simply the limit of his emotional capacity.
However, the consequence of this dynamic is that Angie is condemned to eternally carry the heavier psychological burden in the relationship. She is constantly performing the invisible emotional labor, analyzing the depths, while Jack breezes comfortably across the surface.
You can clearly observe that exact imbalance manifesting years later in the present-day timeline. Angie is internally agonizing over the ethics of their move, the secret demand she issued, the crushing weight of her career, and the symbolism of a dusty crystal bowl.
And Jack. The narrative explicitly notes that Jack appears entirely immune to stress.
He is casually standing in the ruins of their kitchen, happily chatting with the construction workers, sipping expensive coffee, entirely unperturbed by the structural and emotional chaos swirling around him.
Which perfectly establishes the environment for the inevitable collision of these two disparate households. The universe intervenes to dismantle the architectural determinism that has kept them separated.
Exactly. We move forward 3 months into the dead of winter. A massive, violent storm system batters the UK.
The physical destruction is widespread. Mature trees are uprooted, trampolines are blown onto railway tracks.
And in the shared boundary between Sophie's comfortable clutter and Angie's active construction site, the relentless, bitter wind completely destroys the leaning wooden fence separating their properties.
3 massive panels are violently torn down, leaving a gaping, undeniable hole in the boundary.
The destruction of the fence serves as a brilliant physical manifestation of forced proximity. In suburban environments, architectural boundaries dictate social interaction.
Hedges, walls, and fences allow us to curate our exposure to our neighbors. We can nod politely over a barrier, maintaining total control over our privacy.
But when that physical barrier is violently removed by an external shock, the characters can no longer rely on the comfort of passive observation. They are violently thrust into each other's physical and psychological spaces.
And predictably, it is the children who first exploit the breach. Children operate entirely outside the parameters of adult social anxiety and territorial boundaries.
To a child, a destroyed fence isn't a stressful breach of privacy, right? It's an exciting new gateway.
Sophie glances out of her kitchen window. and is horrified to discover that her children, Tom and Katie, have simply walked through the gap and are happily playing inside Angie's newly constructed treehouse with Angie's children.
Sophie is paralyzed by social mortification. She hastily throws a coat over her faded clothes, shoves her feet into trainers, and marches across the newly erased border to retrieve them, bracing herself for Angie's righteous irritation.
Instead, Angie emerges and casually invites Sophie inside the house for a cup of tea.
The act of stepping across Angie's threshold initiates a profound psychological crisis for Sophie.
It induces a state of pure, unadulterated house envy that rapidly metastasizes into acute imposter syndrome.
Sophie steps out of the cold winter air, and her feet immediately register the luxurious warmth of underfloor heating. She audibly gasps.
The months of relentless, noisy construction have yielded a masterpiece. The space has been transformed into an immense, flawless, open-plan family room.
She is confronted with pristine, pale granite worktops, a massive central kitchen island illuminated by stylish pendant lights, a meticulously curated floor-to-ceiling bookcase, and a roaring, wood-burning stove.
We must analyze the specific contrast the author is drawing here. Sophie's residence is described as comfortable but undeniably chaotic. It is a space where the grinding reality of daily domestic labor is visible on every surface.
Angie's newly renovated home, however, operates as a weaponized aesthetic. It resembles a curated lifestyle magazine spread.
Even the inevitable chaos of children's toys has been sanitized. They are not merely put away, they are systematically organized into bespoke, minimalist, Scandi-style cubbyholes situated in a dedicated den equipped with doors designed specifically to conceal the mess from public view.
Sophie looks down at her own attire, a faded, shapeless jumper and worn jeans, and the physical environment completely crushes her self-esteem. Her internal monologue screams, "We live in different worlds."
She instantly projects absolute perfection onto Angie, assuming the lawyer possesses an effortless mastery over her career, her children, and her environment.
But this precise moment of Sophie's maximum insecurity is where the fundamental turning point in their relationship occurs.
Angie, possessing the sharp observational skills of a seasoned solicitor, immediately detects Sophie's overwhelming intimidation. And in a masterstroke of emotional intelligence, Angie actively chooses to dismantle her own facade. She deliberately drops the superwoman mask.
It is a critical deployment of strategic vulnerability. When confronted with someone who is intimidated by your apparent perfection, accepting their admiration only widens the chasm between you.
Angie understands that to forge a genuine connection, she must aggressively undercut Sophie's perception with the messy, unpalatable reality of her existence.
As she pours the tea, Angie looks directly at Sophie and confesses, "I nearly lost it on several occasions."
She doesn't offer a polite, sanitized version of the renovation. She admits that the process was so psychologically destructive, so relentlessly chaotic, that tempers severely frayed, the marriage was strained, and she reached a point of such severe mental depletion that she was forced to send her children away to her in-laws during the school holiday simply to survive the mental load.
She essentially tells Sophie, "You are observing the polished final product, but the psychological toll required to achieve this aesthetic was devastating."
Think about the profound relief of discovering that the individual you most admire, the person effortlessly juggling the high-powered career, the large family, and the architectural digest home, is privately unraveling just as rapidly as you are.
By confessing her near-total breakdown, Angie neutralizes the threat she poses.
She transforms herself from an intimidating, flawless archetype into a flawed, deeply relatable human being. She makes the environment psychologically safe for Sophie to reciprocate.
And Sophie instantly seizes that safety. When Angie politely inquires about Sophie's freelance writing, Sophie discards the standard, socially acceptable response of, "Oh, it's going fine."
Instead, she offers her own raw truth. She admits that her career is currently a disaster.
She exposes her profound professional burnout, confessing her deep-seated fear that she has aged out of relevance and entirely lost her ambition.
The specific details of Sophie's professional anxiety are deeply indicative of a broader cultural and generational shift in how we value labor and expertise.
Absolutely. Sophie launches into a critique of the modern media landscape, complaining bitterly about receiving industry emails, soliciting articles on absurd trends like vaginal steaming and breadcrumbing.
She even jokes that she initially assumed breadcrumbing referred to a culinary technique.
She rolls her eyes at the proliferation of 20-something influencers who believe possessing a laptop and an internet connection equates to being a journalist.
But then, she pushes past the cynicism and admits the humiliating truth. She desperately wants to feel superior to them, but the reality is they possess hundreds of thousands of followers while she possesses 23.
She is agonizingly jealous of their cultural relevance and their power, while simultaneously mourning the death of her own traditional trade.
Angie's response to this confession is the ultimate validation. Angie, the elite, highly educated legal partner, admits she harbors the exact same paralyzing insecurities regarding the young, hyper-ambitious trainees invading her law firm.
She describes these young associates as relentless machines willing to bill hours endlessly to secure a partnership.
Angie confesses, with total exhaustion, "All I want to do is go home and have a glass of wine in the bath."
In the space of this single conversation, the paradigm shifts entirely. They cease to be polite neighbors separated by property lines. They become comrades in arms.
They recognize in one another the shared bone-deep exhaustion of attempting to maintain a flawless public performance in a society that penalizes any display of maternal or professional inadequacy.
This shared vulnerability sets the stage for the final, ultimate convergence of their families during an Easter celebration. Sophie, who has clearly established her lack of domestic prowess, impulsively decides to host an Easter egg hunt for the children and attempts to bake cupcakes from scratch.
Predictably, it is a catastrophic failure.
She pulls a batch of sad, sunken, pale, what she dubs anemic cupcakes from the oven. The kitchen is coated in flour, she is sweating in panic, and at that exact moment of maximum domestic failure, the doorbell rings. The Taylor family has arrived early.
This scenario operates as the definitive stress test for their newly established alliance. Does Angie, the woman with the immaculate Scandi-style cubbyholes, judge the flour-coated chaos?
Not for a second. Angie assesses Sophie's panicked expression and the state of the kitchen, and her reaction is immediate and deeply practical.
She rolls up her expensive sleeves, barks an order at Jack to go fetch the beers, and seamlessly takes over the kitchen, efficiently whipping up a massive batch of frosting and salvaging the anemic cupcakes with professional speed.
Now, early in their acquaintance, Sophie would have interpreted Angie's rapid assumption of control as a manifestation of her alpha lawyer boss mode, a display of superiority designed to highlight Sophie's incompetence.
Yes, but the context has changed entirely. Sophie no longer views it as an assertion of dominance. She accurately recognizes it as an act of profound service.
Angie is not attempting to humiliate Sophie. She is deploying her competence to rescue her friend.
She recognizes a fellow mother who is currently drowning under the crushing societal pressure to execute the perfect, Pinterest-worthy holiday event, and she responds by throwing her a life preserver constructed of buttercream icing.
It is a perfect demonstration of practical empathy. When someone is drowning in logistical and emotional overwhelm, offering empty platitudes like, "let me know if you need help," is useless.
Angie doesn't offer words. She offers immediate, highly competent labor. Labor, in this context, is the ultimate expression of solidarity.
As the party successfully ticks off and the children are unleashed into the garden to hunt for chocolate, we are treated to a brilliant, highly revealing observation regarding the dynamics of their respective husbands.
Eve, a rather shameless mother from the local school run who is attending the party, approaches Sophie and openly begins flirting with Jack from a distance.
She loudly declares Jack to be an absolute dish and playfully asks Sophie if she thinks Jack practices naked yoga in his pristine garden.
Eve's commentary is crucial because she represents the unfiltered, external societal perception of Jack. She sees only the handsome, charming, entirely surface-level perfection.
And Sophie's reaction demonstrates a profound security in her own life choices. She laughs at Eve's thirsty commentary and staunchly defends her physical and emotional preference for her own husband, Alan.
She tells Eve that Jack is almost too perfect, comparing him to a two-dimensional cardboard cutout.
She asserts that she prefers her men real and rugged, complete with the flaws and the stress of running a building company.
It is a vital moment of clarity for Sophie. She may deeply covet Angie's granite worktops and underfloor heating, but she harbors absolutely zero envy regarding Angie's choice of partner.
Which is an incredibly astute, if slightly tragic, observation on Sophie's part, especially given the privileged information we possess regarding the internal mechanics in the Taylor marriage.
Sophie's offhand description of Jack as a cardboard cutout is far more accurate than she could possibly comprehend. She correctly identifies that while Jack presents a flawless aesthetic, he lacks the necessary depth. He is the man who sleeps peacefully through his wife's most agonizing vulnerabilities.
As the afternoon bleeds into evening, the inevitable sugar crash hits the children, who begin the classic negotiation for just 5 more minutes of playtime.
A negotiation that effortlessly stretches into an hour.
The adults are clustered in the kitchen, casually drinking wine, entirely relaxed and undefended in one another's presence. The narrative leaves us with this idyllic, almost cinematic closing image. Jack is out in the garden, wearing novelty aviator sunglasses and a barbecue apron emblazoned with the phrase, "All this and I can cook," happily and obliviously manning the grill.
It is the ultimate portrait of hard-won domestic harmony. The violent external storm that destroyed the physical barrier ultimately facilitated a total clearing of the psychological air.
The text explicitly confirms that the destroyed fence panels are never replaced. The gaping hole simply remains, evolving into an unofficial permanent gateway linking their two lives.
The children flow freely between the gardens. Sophie wanders over in her faded jumpers for morning tea without a second thought. The cognitive shifts for both women are absolute.
Angie recognizes the magnitude of her initial misjudgment. She had arrogantly categorized Sophie as a one-dimensional, aggressively boring suburban mother, only to discover a fiercely intelligent, desperately funny, and deeply relatable ally.
Conversely, Sophie realizes that the terrifying, judgmental legal shark she had projected onto Angie was a complete fabrication. The real Angie is exhausted, quietly lonely, fiercely loyal, and simply paddling as hard as she can to keep her head above the water, exactly like Sophie.
They have successfully forged a micro-community, dissolving the suffocating boundaries of suburban isolation and discovering profound comfort in their shared imperfections.
However, as we conclude our analysis of the behavioral mechanics in this narrative, we are forced to confront a deeply unsettling reality that threatens this newfound peace.
The buried explosive.
Precisely. We must return to the foundational secret. They have currently achieved a beautiful, highly functional domestic equilibrium, and the physical barriers separating them have been permanently erased. They are now intimately, inextricably woven into the daily fabric of each other's lives.
But we must remember the unmentioned catalyst, the secret demand Angie issued that forced her family to flee their comfortable life in Greenwich and uproot their entire existence in the first place.
When you permanently remove the fences and the boundaries between people who are harboring massive, structurally compromised secrets, you remove all the blast shields. If a mere physical weather event was sufficient to source them together, what magnitude of psychological storm is quietly gathering on the horizon, waiting to tear this fragile new ecosystem apart?
You look at a pristine suburban house, right? Like the kind with perfectly manicured lawns, gleaming windows, maybe a shiny, freshly waxed car sitting in the driveway.
Oh yeah, totally.
And your brain just automatically fills in the rest of the picture. We see that flawless exterior, and we instantly assume the foundation underneath is just as solid as the brickwork.
Right. It's almost impossible not to look at a perfectly frosted cake and assume the sponge inside isn't, completely crumbling to dust.
Exactly. We project this absolute, unwavering stability onto people who seem to have their aesthetic lives together.
We project it because we desperately want it to be true. I mean, there is this deep-seated psychological need to believe that visible success and order directly translate to private peace.
Because if we don't believe that, then what are we even doing?
Exactly. If we accept that the people with the beautiful houses and the high-powered careers are secretly falling apart, it forces us to question our own barometers for success,
Oh, 100%. So today, in our deep dive into this source material, we are stripping away that frosting. We are stepping right through the front door of one of those flawless suburban facades.
And we're going to look at a foundation absolutely riddled with stress fractures.
Yeah, we're focusing on a dynamic that is entirely built around the exhausting, suffocating weight of keeping up appearances. Specifically, by contrasting this incredibly manicured couple, Angie and Jack, with their highly observant, deeply insecure neighbor, Sophie.
And what's so fascinating is how the author frames this dynamic right from the jump. We don't start inside Angie's head.
No, we start inside Sophie's.
Right. Sophie is looking across the fence, both literally and metaphorically, and what she sees is like the ultimate modern woman.
Oh, to Sophie, Angie isn't just a neighbor. She is a deity of work-life balance. I mean, Angie is a high-powered lawyer pulling in a massive six-figure salary, handling these intense, highly publicized cases.
And somehow she is simultaneously juggling 4 kids, Benji, Indy, Ellie, and Freddie.
It's wild. To Sophie, Angie is operating like this Olympic gymnast, executing these incredibly complex routines and sticking the landing perfectly every single time without even breaking a sweat.
But that perception of effortlessness is the most intimidating part for someone like Sophie. Because the gut-wrenching reality that we as the audience get to see is that Angie feels completely trapped.
Yeah, she really does. Since moving their family to Pemberton Road, Angie actually describes her internal state as being in limbo.
And limbo isn't just a waiting room. Psychologically speaking, it is a state of profound, paralyzing suspension.
She is stuck.
She's totally stuck. She's between the life she had in their previous neighborhood of Greenwich before a massive, life-altering betrayal occurred, and this new, supposedly fresh start in Finchley.
But the fresh start feels entirely precarious, right? She's performing the role of the successful, happy wife, but she is completely detached from it.
Yeah, it's all performance.
Well, I actually want to push back on the idea of a fresh start, though. Can you really have a fresh start when you drag the exact same baggage to a new postcode?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because on the surface, her husband Jack is presenting as Jack 2.0. He's the reformed, attentive, perfect family man. He's doing the school runs. He's engaging with the kids.
But Angie can't relax into this new version of her husband at all. She's carrying this unshakable feeling that the floor is going to drop out from under her at any second.
And to understand why she is so deeply cynical about Jack 2.0, we have to rewind the tape. We have to look at their early 20s, back in what we can call the Clapham Flat era.
Oh, the Clapham Flat era. That era is foundational to understanding their entire marital architecture.
They were so young.
Young, ambitious, and they made this very specific, deliberate choice to adopt a heavily domesticated lifestyle way earlier than their peers.
Right. While their friends were out hitting the clubs and living typical 20-something lives, Angie and Jack were actively turning down invitations.
They were staying in, cooking Sunday roast, curling up on the sofa. They were isolating themselves in this bubble of simulated maturity.
You call it maturity, but I look at that phase and I don't see maturity. I see them playing house in a snow globe.
A snow globe. That's a great way to put it.
It's beautifully idyllic, self-contained, but inherently fragile. It only takes one hard shake to completely scramble the entire scene inside.
And Angie was thriving in that environment. She was climbing the ranks at her law firm, building a reputation as a rising star, and this cozy domestic life felt like the perfect, stable counterweight for her.
But the problem with the performance is that it requires stamina. And Jack simply didn't have the stamina to sustain that level of domestic maturity.
No, he didn't. It felt blissful to Angie because she was genuinely ready for it. But for Jack, it was a costume he put on to match her ambition. He was playing a role he just hadn't grown into yet.
Which brings us to the exact moment the snow globe shatters. And the text makes this moment so visceral.
It really does.
It's a Friday evening. Angie has been grinding away at the law firm, working later than she wanted to. She's exhausted, but she's rushing home, eager to get back to Jack.
She has this whole routine pictured in her head.
Exactly. He'll be waiting with a cold beer. Maybe they'll order a takeaway. They'll decompress. She hurries up the stairs, turns her key in the lock, and opens the door to a completely dark flat.
Just silence and shadows.
She calls out his name, but she already knows the space is empty.
And the physiological shift in Angie in that moment is immediate. I mean, she goes from the anticipation of comfort to an acute spike of adrenaline.
Right, because she checks her phone, expecting a text saying he got held up. Nothing, no notifications. An hour goes by, then 2.
By the 4th hour, the tension is just unbearable.
She is frantically messaging his friends, trying to sound casual but internally spiraling. She starts convincing herself he might have had one too many and gotten into an accident.
Naturally, your brain goes to the worst place.
By midnight, she has abandoned any pretense of being okay. She is crawling into bed, wide awake in the dark, running through every catastrophic, horrific scenario a lawyer's mind can conjure up.
And for a woman whose entire identity is built around controlling her narrative, controlling the courtroom, her career trajectory, this sudden lack of control is agonizing.
It's torturous.
She is entirely powerless in that dark apartment. She doesn't know where the person she loves most in the world is, and her mind fills that void. She is literally on the verge of dialing the police.
And then, at 6 a.m., the front door finally opens. Jack stumbles in.
Oh, this part.
He is completely disheveled, his eyes are bloodshot, he's disoriented, and he absolutely reeks of stale beer. And his excuse is infuriatingly casual.
He mumbles something about going out with a client for a quick drink, claims things just got out of hand, and says he left his phone on his desk at the office.
He doesn't offer a groveling apology. He doesn't acknowledge the sheer terror he put her through. He literally just sits on the edge of the bed, peels off his socks, leans back, closes his eyes, and acts like the conversation is over.
The dismissal of her feelings in that moment is profound. And, this wasn't an isolated incident. If it were, it could be chalked up to a genuinely stupid mistake.
But it wasn't.
No, this becomes a deeply ingrained pattern of escapism. Jack keeps reverting to his single lifestyle whenever the pressure of their snow globe gets too much. And the real toxicity lies in how he manages the fallout.
The gaslighting is intense. When Angie confronts him, rightfully furious and terrified, he throws his hands up defensively.
Yeah, he tells her, Angie, I love you. I'm just blowing off a little steam, okay? We're still young. Let's act like it. It's not like I'm cheating on you.
Ugh, he uses his fidelity as a shield to completely invalidate her entirely rational fear.
Let's dissect the psychology of what Jack is doing there. By constantly minimizing his actions, he is weaponizing Angie's deepest, most hidden vulnerability.
Wait, unpack that for a second.
So we learned from the source material that back at university, Angie's peers referred to her as the Ice Princess.
Oh, right.
She was top of her class, fiercely driven, outwardly intimidating. She seemed completely immune to the messy drama of student life. But underneath that armor, her darkest, most closely guarded fear was that she loved Jack far more than he loved her.
Wait, really? The high-powered, fiercely independent lawyer's biggest fear is an imbalance of affection. That feels almost contradictory.
It's actually incredibly common. The more competent and self-reliant someone appears, the more terrifying it is to relinquish that control to love.
Oh, wow.
So by repeatedly abandoning her to act like a single man on a bender, Jack is actively feeding that specific monster of anxiety inside her.
Every time he chooses the pub over her, he is confirming her worst fear.
Right.
That her love, their marriage, their life together, is just not enough to anchor him.
Exactly. It forces her into a state of cognitive dissonance. She has to start doubting her own very valid feelings. He tells her she's overreacting so often that she actually starts to believe him.
She convinces herself that they are just young, independent people learning to turn a blind eye just to survive the anxiety of waiting for the door to open. She adopts this cool girl persona to cope.
We don't have kids. He's just letting off steam. It's fine.
Which makes the sudden, incredibly abrupt pivot to parenthood feel entirely jarring. Just picture this. They are taking a leisurely Sunday afternoon walk across Clapham Common.
A perfectly normal day.
Right. And out of nowhere, completely unprompted, Jack stops and announces, I think we should start trying for a baby.
Blindsided.
Angie is totally blindsided. She's 28 years old, her career is skyrocketing, and she cherishes the freedom they have to book weekend getaways at the drop of a hat. A family was nowhere on her radar.
It begs the immediate question of Jack's actual motivation. Why now? Why, in the midst of his pattern of acting out and escaping their domestic life, does he suddenly want to anchor them down with a child?
I have to play devil's advocate against Jack here because I genuinely don't trust his motives. Is a baby really just a magic band-aid for his boredom with his marriage?
Well, he tries to frame it as this romantic epiphany. He tells Angie he was sitting in some dive bar at 3 a.m., staring into the bottom of a pint glass, and he suddenly realized he'd rather be home with his beautiful wife.
That feels incredibly calculated to me. He's bored with playing house, he spent months acting like an idiot, and now he feels the relationship fracturing.
So he reaches for the biggest, most absolute commitment he can think of, to lock himself back into the role of the good guy.
Yeah, you're touching on a concept known in psychology as a geographic cure, but applied here to a life stage rather than a physical location.
Exactly. People often believe that changing their circumstances, moving to a new city, getting a new job, or having a baby will fix their internal restlessness. Jack genuinely believes that changing his status to father will magically bestow upon him the maturity he lacks.
But Angie's immediate reaction is brilliant because it is so brutally logical. She doesn't get swept up in the romance of the idea at all.
She looks him dead in the eye and points out that he won't be the one carrying the child for 9 months. He won't be the one going through the physical horror of labor.
And crucially, he won't be the one putting a massive, high-trajectory career on hold to care for a newborn. She dismantles his argument piece by piece.
She recognizes instantly that the societal and physical burden of this decision will fall almost entirely on her shoulders.
She tells him, flatly, I will think about it, which is universal code for absolutely not. And she actively changes the subject. She shuts it down.
And
yet, despite this incredibly rational defense of her current life, 3 months later, she is pregnant. So we have to unpack this. Why did Angie, this fiercely independent woman, suddenly cave?
Because logic rarely wins against deep-seated emotional terror.
Right, you think she caved out of fear?
Unquestionably, it was a desperate bid to anchor a wandering husband. Remember her core fear,
Yeah.
that he doesn't love her enough to stay.
She was terrified of him slipping permanently back into those 6 a.m. benders.
Yes, she fundamentally believed that giving him what he claimed to want most to family would force him to finally grow up and stay put.
So when he brought it up, he was attentive, he was romantic.
She basked in the glow of his renewed attention, and in a moment of vulnerability, she quietly stopped taking her birth control pills. She sacrificed her own timeline to stabilize the marriage.
She's trying to manage his behavior by altering her own biology. It's an incredible illusion of control. She thinks, if I create this family unit, I control his desire to leave.
But as we see when she actually becomes a mother, control is the very first thing she loses. The transition into motherhood completely strips her of the armor she has spent her entire adult life building.
Let's follow that transition, starting with the pregnancy revelation with her first child, Benji. It is such a beautifully written, complex sequence.
It's iconic.
She is on the tube, the London Underground, commuting into the city for work. It's crowded, it's noisy, it's the epitome of the daily grind. She hasn't even taken a pregnancy test yet. She merely has a missed period.
Just waiting to see what happens.
Right. But sitting on that train, surrounded by strangers, she is suddenly hit by this visceral, undeniable anticipation. It's not a logical deduction. It's an entirely biological, cellular realization.
And the environment heightens that internal shift. She is surrounded by the aggressive energy of the city, commuting to a cutthroat law firm. Yet she is experiencing this profoundly intimate, ancient biological awakening.
She gets off the train, walks into a chemist, a local pharmacy, buys a couple of tests, and smuggles them into the office. She bypasses her desk, goes straight into the corporate bathrooms, and locks herself in a toilet cubicle.
Just imagine the contrast there.
She is wearing a tailored power suit, surrounded by the sterile marble environment of a high-end corporate law firm, and she is waiting 10 agonizing minutes in a toilet stall to see if her entire life is about to change.
When that telltale second blue line slowly appears on the wand, she experiences a fundamental restructuring of her identity.
She wonders, looking at that line, if this is what maternal instinct actually feels like. This immediate, overpowering, almost violent need to protect the tiny, abstract concept of a being inside her.
And what fascinates me most about this scene is her reaction for the rest of the workday. She walks back out to her desk, and suddenly the high-stakes office politics, the urgent emails, it all just turns into white noise.
She feels like she is floating on a cloud, hovering high above the petty minutiae of everyday life. But here's the critical detail. She doesn't immediately call Jack.
No, she doesn't.
She intentionally cherishes having that small, secret slice of time entirely to herself. For those few hours, no one else in the entire world knew the secret but her and the baby.
It is a moment of pure, unadulterated, selfish joy. And I use selfish in the most positive sense. For a woman whose marriage is riddled with anxiety and the constant monitoring of her partner's moods, this secret is a sanctuary.
They are in it together, just the two of them.
It's liberating because, for that brief, beautiful window, Jack isn't a part of the equation. It's entirely hers. It is an assertion of selfhood, right at the threshold of motherhood.
But of course, the reality of a shared life crashes in the second. She unlocks the front door of their flat that evening. Her private bubble pops. And she actually manipulates the reveal.
She does. She presents Jack with the second unopened test from the box so they could wait for the result together.
She actively maintains the illusion that they're finding out at the exact same time because she knows Jack's ego couldn't handle the fact that she harbored this monumental secret all day without him.
And Jack's reaction is exactly what you would expect from someone who views life as a series of grand cinematic moments. He doesn't just smile, he explodes with joy.
He punches the air, he sweeps her up, he kisses her.
And he immediately starts making these massive, sweeping promises of solidarity. He pours 2 glasses of orange juice, clinks them together, and declares a solemn no-alcohol pact.
He vows to be entirely sober in solidarity with her for the next 9 months.
A pact that he manages to abandon in less than 48 hours.
It's infuriating. Less than 2 days.
It perfectly highlights his performative nature. Jack is in love with the idea of being the supportive partner. He craves the dramatic declaration, the applause for his grand gesture, but he completely lacks the discipline for the actual day-to-day reality.
But in the spirit of fairness, I have to admit that during that first pregnancy and in the immediate aftermath of Benji's birth, Jack actually steps up. He surprises her.
He does, yeah.
He doesn't retreat to the pub. Benji arrives after a shockingly quick, relatively easy labor, and Jack is right there in the delivery room, holding her hand, acting as her anchor.
When they bring Benji home, Jack is changing nappies the diapers. He's burping the baby. He's waking up in the middle of the night to soothe him.
Angie is awash with these potent new mum hormones, and she is genuinely shocked by how much she adores motherhood. Part of that is because she was an only child with a somewhat distant mother, so building this family feels incredibly healing.
But a massive part of her joy is that Jack is making it easy. They are finally operating as a cohesive team.
It's the realization of the fantasy she hoped the baby would bring. The anchor worked.
Jack is tethered, focused, and engaged. But the fundamental flaw in their dynamic is that Jack's good behavior is entirely conditional on things being relatively easy and on him being praised for his involvement.
Which brings us to the catastrophic arrival of baby number 2, Indy. The contrast between Benji's easy arrival and Indy's birth is like night and day.
It is a masterclass in a domino effect of compounding stress.
First of all, Angie gets pregnant again incredibly fast. Benji's barely out of the infant stage when she realizes her periods hadn't returned, not because she was still breastfeeding, but because she was already expecting again.
She is thrown back into the physical toll of pregnancy before her body is even fully recovered.
And then the birth itself shatters her expectations. Because her first labor was a breeze, she assumed the second would follow suit. Instead, Indy's birth requires an emergency C-section.
This is a massive physical trauma that completely knocks Angie off her feet, leaving her recovering from major abdominal surgery while trying to care for a toddler.
And Indy, from the absolute second she enters the world, is difficult. She is born turning tomato-colored with indignant rage. She is colicky. She cries incessantly all night long.
She flat out refuses to take a bottle, insisting on breastfeeding every single hour. She's a demanding, exhausting force of nature.
And crucially, profoundly, Indy actively rejects Jack. If anyone other than Angie attempts to hold her, she arches her back and screams bloody murder.
Now think about Jack's core personality. He is a man who is used to being the charming center of attention. He thrives on being adored.
Right.
When his own infant daughter rejects him, he doesn't have the emotional maturity to see it as a normal, albeit frustrating, phase of infant development. He takes it as a personal insult.
He is visibly hurt and entirely demoralized by his inability to soothe her. Add to that the physical environment they are trapped in. They are still living in that tiny, pokey Clapham flat.
What was cozy for a young couple is now a claustrophobic nightmare.
The flat is bursting at the seams. You have Benji, a 1-year-old toddler who has just learned to walk and is charging around like a bull in a china shop, crashing into furniture. You have Indy, a constantly wailing newborn. And you have Angie, recovering from surgery, utterly exhausted.
The environment is an absolute pressure cooker. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The downstairs neighbors even start banging on the ceiling to complain about the constant noise.
It is the absolute definition of chaos.
And we know what Jack does when faced with chaos. When a situation arises where he isn't the star player, where the demands are high and the praise is low, he regresses.
He experiences a total catastrophic relapse into his old behaviors.
He can't handle coming home to the screaming toddler, the furious baby, and his stressed-out, exhausted wife. So what does he do?
He starts finding reasons to stay late at the office. Suddenly, there's a crucial client who needs entertaining at a steakhouse. A colleague is leaving drinks that he absolutely must attend for office politics.
And Angie is left trapped in that tiny flat. She is resentful, she is sleep-deprived to the point of hallucination, and she is completely isolated because Indy refuses a bottle and loathes Jack.
Meaning Angie can't even leave the house for an hour to have a coffee with a friend. She is a prisoner to her biology and her demanding infant.
Notice the shift in Jack's psychological framing during this relapse, too. Back in their early marriage, he justified his benders by claiming they were just young and blowing off steam. He framed it as a right.
But this time, he knows he is entirely in the wrong.
He comes home, he is intensely apologetic in the cold light of morning, but he claims a lack of agency. He tells Angie he simply can't help himself. He weaponizes the immense stress of his home life, using it as an excuse for his lack of self-control.
He essentially says, the house is so chaotic, I need this release. It's a complete cowardly abdication of his responsibilities as a partner and a father during the hardest, most grueling months of their lives.
That's awful.
It makes my blood boil just thinking about it. Because imagine the scene. Angie has spent 3 hours pacing the tiny living room, bouncing a screaming baby, trying to keep the toddler asleep. She finally, mercifully gets Indy to close her eyes.
And right at that moment,
The front door clicks open. Jack rocks up in the early hours of the morning, clumsy and drunk. He drops his keys, he bumps the wall, the noise wakes the baby, the screaming starts all over again, and Jack just collapses face first onto the bed and passes out.
it is a profound betrayal. So the question is, how does Angie survive this without completely breaking?
She survives by ruthlessly reclaiming the reins of her life. She realizes that depending on Jack for emotional or practical stability is a losing game. At exactly 6 months postpartum, she makes an agonizing, highly calculated decision.
She hires a new, highly recommended nanny, and she hands over a wailing Indy and a clingy Benji. She puts her power suit back on, and she returns to her law firm.
And the text makes it clear this isn't about career ambition in that moment. It is purely 100% for her mental survival. She walks to the train station that first morning, crying the entire way.
She feels wretched, battling intense maternal guilt, but she knows with absolute certainty that if she stays in that flat, she will lose her mind.
Getting out, getting that physical distance, putting her professional identity back on it acts as a life raft. She starts feeling competent again, and once she regains her footing and her sense of self, she turns her sights on her marriage.
She initiates a confrontation that fundamentally alters their dynamic. She doesn't yell. She lays down the law. She tells him, I turned a blind eye to your vanishing acts when we were first married, but the rules have changed.
Yeah.
You have a family now. We don't feel like a team. We feel like a liability. This stops now or we are done.
She issues an ultimatum, and this ultimatum leads directly to the creation of what they call Jack 2.0 and their desperate move out of that Clapham flat.
They buy a sprawling, beautiful house in the affluent neighborhood of Greenwich. And it seems to work. The physical space directly alleviates the claustrophobic psychological pressure.
Jack stops pulling all-nighters. He stops behaving unpredictably. As Indy grows, she decides Jack is actually her favorite person in the world instead of her enemy. Angie's back at work, back in control. The crisis appears to be averted.
But we have to look very closely at how Angie exercises this regained control moving forward, because it is intense.
It is beyond intense. It is clinical. The arrival of their third and fourth children, Ellie and Freddie, do not happen by accident. They are planned with, as the source material explicitly states, military precision.
She leaves absolutely nothing to chance.
Exactly. She schedules elective C-sections so she knows the exact hour they will be born, eliminating the terrifying unpredictability of labor that traumatized her with Indy.
She strictly mandates her maternity leave, ensuring she is back at her desk within 6 months, regardless of the emotional pull.
When their youngest, little Freddie, is born, the text describes her literally handing the baby to the nanny, picking up her briefcase, departing for the office, and telling Jack over her shoulder, I'm done, 4 is the limit. And Jack knows better than to push her on it.
Some might look at that and say, wow, what an incredibly organized, empowered career woman. But when you look at the emotional subtext of everything she just went through, this isn't just organized family planning.
No, this is a textbook trauma response.
The sheer chaos of Indy's birth, coupled with Jack's devastating betrayal of abandoning her when she was at her most vulnerable, nearly destroyed her sense of self.
By dictating the exact non-negotiable terms of her body, her reproduction, and her career timeline, she is building an impenetrable fortress.
She is ensuring that she is never, ever caught off guard and rendered that powerless again. She uses scheduling and medical intervention to protect herself from the terrifying unpredictability of both her own biology and her husband's flighty nature. If she dictates the terms, she can't be surprised.
She is gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles are white. And this highly controlled, deeply traumatized version of Angie provides the most incredible contrast with her current neighbor in Finchley, Sophie.
Let's look at the parenting contrast here, because it is a brilliant exploration of modern maternal insecurity. We get this vivid, slightly stressful scene of Sophie trying to pack school lunches in the morning.
Her kitchen is a disaster zone. There's a half-deflated paddling pool out in the garden filled with grass and dead insects. She is scrambling, stressing over every micro detail of her kids' lives. I look at Sophie's parenting style, and it reminds me of a helicopter that's stuck in a holding pattern.
That's a very apt visual. She is expending massive amounts of energy just hovering in place, constantly scanning for threats.
She is vibrating with anxiety. She's fretting over her son Tom's spelling tests. She's stressing about the 11+ exams, which, for those unfamiliar with the UK system, are these incredibly high-stakes, highly competitive entrance exams for selective grammar schools that kids take at age 11.
It's a massive source of pressure.
She's secretly Googling private tutors. She's agonizing over whether her kids are fitting in, overanalyzing whose birthday sleepover they weren't invited to. She is micromanaging their social and academic lives.
While Angie, standing in stark contrast next door, operates more like an air traffic controller. She is tracking 4 very different planes, her 4 children, but she fundamentally trusts them to fly the routes themselves.
She doesn't hover. She tells Sophie, quite plainly, that she and Jack believe in giving their children the freedom to make massive mistakes and figure out who they want to be.
When Sophie anxiously voices her endless fears about the kids' futures, Angie just waves a hand dismissively and tells her, "You love them, they're happy, they're safe. Stop worrying about it."
And the ultimate litmus test of these completely opposing styles is the debate over Angie's oldest son, Benji, going to drama school. Benji is a teenager who hates studying, loathes playing rugby, and is only truly happy when he's in drama class acting.
And over a casual dinner, Jack just casually drops into conversation that Benji is probably just going to scrape a bare minimum pass on his GCSEs, the standard exams kids take at 16, and then he's going to skip his A-levels entirely.
He's not going to take the university entrance exams. He's just going to go straight to a performing arts school.
Sophie is absolutely floored by this revelation. She turns to Angie, fully expecting this highly successful, fiercely motivated, academically brilliant lawyer to be horrified that her eldest son is throwing away a traditional academic path.
But Angie just nods calmly in agreement. She is perfectly fine with it.
And this moment is a massive psychological trigger for Sophie. It shines a blinding spotlight directly onto her own unfulfilled past. We learn that when Sophie was a teenager, she lived for drama.
She had these big, beautiful dreams of being on Broadway. But her parents were practical, terrified people who crushed those dreams. They flat out refused to let her attend a performing arts school. They forced her to sit her A-levels, forced her into journalism college, and pushed her down a safe, respectable career path.
A safe career that is currently stalled out into nothingness. Sophie is trapped in a massive, paralyzing writer's block. She spends her days sending desperate networking emails to old journalism contacts and receiving nothing but automated out-of-office replies. Her career is practically non-existent.
So when Sophie looks across the dinner table and sees Angie and Jack unconditionally supporting Benji's unconventional, risky path, it inadvertently highlights everything Sophie lost. It shows her the parents she wishes she had.
And it exposes exactly why she is overcompensating so aggressively with her own kids. She's pushing her son Tom toward grammar school with those 11+ exams solely because she was pushed.
She is micromanaging their academic success because she feels an utter, hollow lack of professional fulfillment in her own life. She's trying to extract a sense of achievement from her children's report cards.
This realization forces Sophie into a really profound existential crisis, which she ponders while walking the kids to school alongside Jack. She looks at Jack, who is perfectly happy to step back from his career to help out, and she thinks of Angie, who is out there in the city conquering the legal world.
And Sophie asks herself a question that tortures so many modern parents. Think about the pressure you see around you today. Is it enough?
Is it enough to just be the mom who cuddles them when they scrape a knee?
Who wipes away the tears, who spends hours helping with fractions at the kitchen table, and who cooks hot meals every night? Or does modern motherhood now explicitly require a woman to also juggle a highly visible, successful career outside the home to actually earn the label of a good mother? Has the bar been raised so high that it's impossible to clear?
Society delivers incredibly contradictory messaging. You must be relentlessly emotionally devoted to your children's psychological well-being, but you must also be an independent, self-actualized financial powerhouse.
Angie and Sophie represent the extreme opposite ends of this modern motherhood spectrum, yet neither feels successful.
Angie has the massive career, she provides a luxurious life, but we see later that she carries profound, crushing guilt when her daughter Indy screams at her, "You're always working, Mom. You're never there when I actually need you." That cuts Angie to the bone.
Meanwhile, Sophie is always there. She is the ultimate mother hen clucking around her brood, but she feels utterly inadequate, almost embarrassed by her domesticity, because her career is dead and her spreadsheet shows she earned virtually nothing this year.
They're both trying to fulfill society's impossible demands from different angles, and they're both deeply insecure. It's the good mother complex in action, where the finish line is constantly maliciously moved back just as you reach it, ensuring that no matter what choice a woman makes, her baseline emotion is guilt.
And smack in the middle of this swirling vortex of female anxiety is Jack. Which leads us to a fascinating dynamic shift. Jack's temporary role reversal.
To support Indy's anxious transition into secondary school, Jack convinces his boss to let him reduce his working hours for a few months. He essentially becomes a part-time house husband. He takes over the school runs, the pickups, the drop-offs.
And the imagery the author uses to describe this is incredible. Picture Jack with his easy charm and good looks strolling up to the school gates. He's scooping up little Freddie before the toddler even considers crying.
He is instantly swarmed. He becomes the absolute, undisputed center of attention for all the PTA moms gathered at the fence.
He absolutely revels in the adoration. He is a rooster in the henhouse. He eagerly soaks up the playground gossip, excitedly telling Sophie about how Frankie's mom hired this brilliant, secretive private tutor and is aggressively refusing to share his contact number.
He claims that PTA meetings sound like his idea of a bureaucratic hell, but simultaneously, he is acting like the newly elected mayor of the school drop-off, holding court and gathering a flock of attentive women around him every morning.
But when he actually talks to Sophie about this new arrangement, the facade slips just a fraction. He plays it off as a massive privilege. He says, "I'm so lucky I get to stay in a job I love, reduce my hours, and not even worry about earning more money or climbing the corporate ladder." Honestly, how many guys get to say that?
But Sophie is incredibly perceptive. She hears him say, "I'm lucky," twice in the same breath, and her internal alarm bells go off. She wonders, is he saying this to convince her, or is he desperately trying to convince himself?
Sophie hits the nail on the head. She recognizes that Jack is aggressively masking a deeply wounded ego. Let's look at the sociology of modern masculinity here. Jack is married to a woman who is not just the primary breadwinner, but a financial powerhouse, likely pulling in multiple six figures.
No matter how much Jack plays the progressive, modern, supportive husband who claims to love spending more time with the kids, the traditional, deeply ingrained societal expectation of the male as the provider is still echoing in his head.
He feels emasculated by her success.
Precisely. So he overcompensates by playing the fool. He acts goofy. He cheerfully admits to the other moms that his kids walk all over him because he's basically just a big kid himself.
He does this deliberately to deflect from any serious scrutiny regarding his earning power or career trajectory compared to his wife's.
He leans heavily into this fun, harmless dad persona because the playground is a domain where he can unequivocally win the popularity contest without ever having to compete with Angie's intimidating competence.
While Jack is busy playing mayor of the playground and massaging his ego, Angie is experiencing a completely unexpected, deeply revealing bonding moment with Sophie. This is one of the most memorable scenes in the text. The secret spliff.
Oh, this scene is fantastic.
It's a freezing Saturday night in late November, just a few weeks before the Christmas madness begins. The kids are all finally asleep, the houses are quiet, and suddenly Angie sneaks out her back door, slips through the gap in the fence over to Sophie's patio, and pulls a freshly rolled joint out of her coat pocket with a mischievous grin.
And it isn't just standard issue weed. Angie casually drops the detail that these are high-grade drugs she personally confiscated from a very high-profile, wealthy footballer client.
The client was being prosecuted for an excessive speeding offense, and she found the stash in his jacket pocket right before they walked into a disciplinary hearing.
It's such a brilliant, specific detail. It perfectly reinforces Angie's high-stakes, glamorous professional world, reminding us of her power while simultaneously subverting her rigid, rule-following ice princess persona. She stole drugs from a celebrity client and brought them to a suburban patio.
It creates an immediate sense of shared transgression.
Exactly.
I compare this moment to two exhausted soldiers sharing an illicit cigarette in a freezing trench. They are huddled in their thick winter coats on cold, hard patio furniture. The air is biting, their breath is pluming in the cold, and they're taking tentative puffs, trying desperately not to cough and wake the neighbors.
Sophie admits she hasn't smoked anything since she was a reckless teenager. Angie confesses that she was always too much of a square at university, too terrified of losing control or damaging her brain cells to ever really partake.
But they smoke it, and they get incredibly, paralyzingly high.
The high hits Sophie so hard her legs go weak, and she physically has to sit down on the freezing chair.
Oh.
And then the floodgates open.
They start laughing, not just chuckling, hysterical, breathless, tear-inducing laughter. They get stuck on this visual of Angie, the sensible lawyer, having a massive midlife crisis and trying to cram her 4 giant children into a tiny, 2-seater Porsche.
They picture Benji and Indy strapped to the roof rack and little Freddie stuffed in the boot. It's absurd, but they dissolve into uncontrollable giggles. They are bent double, tears rolling down their faces, clutching their stomachs.
That hysteria is a vital psychological release valve. The sheer pressure of the lives they are leading demands a release. And in the midst of that laughter, a genuine crack appears in Angie's meticulously maintained armor.
Wiping away tears, she looks at Sophie and actually admits out loud, maybe I actually am having a midlife crisis.
Which is huge.
It is monumental. For a woman who controls every single variable of her existence, from her high-stakes career to the exact hour of her children's births, admitting to a crisis, even in a joking tone while stoned on a patio, is a staggering confession of vulnerability.
It bridges the gap between them. It cements a deep, authentic bond that goes far beyond the superficial, polite, neighborly chatter they usually engage in over the fence.
Later, when Sophie's husband Alan comes out onto the patio in his dressing gown and cheerfully offers them bowls of crisps and chocolate to cure their munchies, Sophie looks at him with genuine affection.
She turns to Angie and says, "He's a keeper." And then, almost as an afterthought, she adds, "So's Jack."
And that's the tell. That is the moment the mask slips, because the text explicitly notes that upon hearing "So's Jack," Angie's face clouds over instantly.
The laughter dies in her eyes for a split second before she forces a shrug and agrees. She knows he isn't a keeper, but she can't say it.
And this newfound, fragile closeness between the women is immediately complicated by a parallel narrative thread: the subtly escalating, dangerous closeness between Sophie and Jack. This brings us to the barn dance defection.
The setup here is a classic recipe for disaster. Alan, Sophie's reliable, slightly boring husband, is called away for the weekend to care for his elderly parents because his mother fell and broke her hip. Sophie is left alone.
The local primary school is throwing a massive cowboy-themed barn dance fundraiser. Sophie gets dressed up, plaid shirt, tight jeans, cowboy boots, and heads next door to go with Angie and Jack as planned.
But when she arrives, Angie is supposedly sick. Angie claims she has a terrible cold, but we, the audience, know she is secretly spiraling into a deep, dark, depressive episode and is using the cold to hide under the duvet.
So Angie insists they go without her, and Sophie and Jack end up walking to the barn dance together, just the two of them in the dark.
The author uses highly specific, tactile, physical details in this scene to make the reader deeply uncomfortable. We are meant to feel the boundaries blurring in real time.
Oh, absolutely. As a reader, you are screaming at the page. It's a brisk, windy evening. They're walking down the pavement, and Sophie shivers. Jack doesn't just ask if she's cold.
He stops, unwraps his own thick woolen scarf from his neck, and steps into her personal space to carefully, intimately wrap it around her neck. And Sophie explicitly notes the warm, masculine smell of his aftershave lingering in the wool.
She feels this sudden, hot, giddy feeling flutter in her stomach, and she has to actively mentally suppress it, chastising herself, wondering what on earth is wrong with her.
They cross a threshold of physical intimacy that is inappropriate for a neighbor's husband. They get to the school hall, which is decked out with itchy hay bales and fake wagon wheels, and they spend the evening drinking cheap beers, laughing loudly, and giggling at their own terrible line dancing.
They're operating like a couple on a first date. And then the external validation arrives. Eve, another school mom who loves to stir the pot, sidles up to Sophie, gives her a conspiratorial nudge, and whispers that Jack is looking Brokeback Mountain hot in his cowboy gear.
Sophie immediately shuts it down. She denies any attraction, telling Eve to stop being daft because Jack's wife is her good friend. But we have to interrogate that denial. Is her denial genuine loyalty? Or is Sophie dangerously, quietly bored in her comfortable, passionless marriage to Alan?
We know from her earlier internal monologues that while she adores Alan, he is safe, he is predictable. They do not have that cinematic, volatile, Hollywood blockbuster passion that she constantly observes and envies between Jack and Angie.
Jack represents danger, he represents excitement, and right now he is giving her a level of focused, flirtatious male attention she simply isn't getting while sitting on the sofa watching documentaries with Alan every night.
She is starved for exactly the kind of chaotic energy Jack radiates. When she decides to leave the dance early to go relieve her teenage babysitter, Jack immediately offers to walk her home through the dark streets.
It's a chivalrous offer, but it's laced with tension. Sophie insists he stay and enjoy the party, but as she walks home alone in the biting night air, still wearing his scarf, she is acutely, painfully aware of the lack of romance and thrill in her own life.
She makes a firm resolution to book a fancy night out for her and Alan as soon as he gets back, desperately trying to inject some spark to stop them from turning into a boring old married couple.
It's a powder keg just waiting for a match. She's trying to manufacture passion with Alan to stop herself from seeking it with Jack. But before we see if that spark catches, we have to look at the absolute devastating breaking point for Angie. The perfectly constructed suburban facade finally violently crumbles.
The psychological architecture she built to survive her marriage completely gives way in one brutal afternoon.
We find Angie sitting alone on a cold, hard, wooden garden bench in her backyard. It is freezing February weather, yet she doesn't even have a coat on. She is just pulling the collar of her turtleneck up over her mouth, shivering violently, staring blankly at the frost on the grass. She is completely paralyzed by terror.
Why? Because she realized on Friday, while mindlessly staring at boxes of tampons in a newsagent, that her period is late.
And for Angie, a woman whose menstrual cycle operates like a Swiss watch, who tracks it with a tiny, meticulous pencil P in her diary so she is never caught unprepared, this is a catastrophe of epic proportions.
We need to break down exactly why a potential fifth pregnancy feels less like an inconvenience and more like an actual death sentence to her. It is not just about the logistical nightmare, though she is 42 years old and managing 4 children alongside a demanding legal career is already pushing the absolute limits of human endurance.
She vividly remembers the exhaustion. She doesn't want to go back to sleepless nights, sterilizing bottles and changing nappies, but that is secondary.
The real, soul-crushing issue is her absolute unwavering certainty that her fragile, painstakingly recovering marriage would not survive the stress.
She knows the pattern.
Exactly. She knows on a cellular level that if she introduces the chaos, the crying, and the demands of a newborn back into their dynamic, Jack will shatter. He will revert to his escapism. He will run.
The marriage will break. And she knows that this time, after everything she has already forgiven, the break will be permanent.
And to understand why she is so utterly certain he will break, the narrative finally drops the bomb. We finally get the revelation of the ultimate betrayal. We learn the explosive, ugly secret behind why they actually fled their seemingly perfect, wealthy life in Greenwich and moved to Finchley.
It had absolutely nothing to do with needing more space or wanting to be closer to her mother or desiring a fresh start. It was the hot pink thong.
The physical, undeniable manifestation of Jack's inherent unreliability.
I remember reading the scene and gasping out loud. It is a mundane Saturday morning back in Greenwich. The sun is shining. Angie is doing the most normal domestic task imaginable, sorting the laundry.
She picks up a pair of Jack's jeans, turns them inside out to protect the denim in the wash, and she sees a flash of bright color caught in the pocket.
She hooks her finger through it, pulls, and out comes a skimpy hot pink lace thong. It flutters to the laundry room floor. Just imagine the visceral shock of that moment. The walls literally close in on her as she stares at this piece of fabric, realizing her husband might be sleeping with someone else.
She doesn't cry. The ice princess takes over. She marches upstairs, waves the thong in his face, and demands the truth.
And Jack's reaction tells you everything you need to know. All the blood drains from his face. He goes pale, and then he launches into the most pathetic, audacious excuse imaginable.
It is insulting to her intelligence. He claims he went out for innocent work drinks on Thursday. Then, somehow, he ended up back at some younger girl's flat for a nightcap.
He claims he was just drunk and being stupid, that one of the girls made an aggressive pass at him and kissed him, but he swears he suddenly sobered up, realized what he was doing, pushed her away, left immediately, and threw her phone number in the bin on the way home.
And the kicker. He claims he didn't even realize she had maliciously slipped her underwear into his pocket as a prank.
The audacity of the excuse is staggering, but as Angie rightly points out, the literal truth of whether he physically slept with the girl or not is almost irrelevant.
Right, because the damage is done. He deliberately put himself in the exact situation where infidelity was inevitable. A married father of 4 does not accidentally end up in a young woman's apartment at 2 a.m. for a nightcap.
He demonstrated, yet again, that he values the cheap thrill of acting single, the validation of a younger woman's attention, over the profound security and vows of his family. He almost cheated. And she knows with absolute clarity that it is only a matter of time before he actually crosses the line.
She looks at him, disgusted, and asks the central question of their marriage. Why isn't being a father and a husband enough for you?
So she finally does what we've been waiting for. She kicks him out. She tells him to pack a bag and go stay at his brother Sam's flat by the end of the day. And the humiliation Angie feels during the separation is agonizing.
She is a proud woman. She doesn't tell a single soul, not even her closest, oldest friends in Greenwich, because the mere thought of people knowing her handsome husband prefers flirting with a cheap bimbo in a bar over coming home to his family mortifies her. She isolates herself entirely in her shame.
But isolation with 4 children is impossible. The pressure of the children acting as an innocent Greek chorus forces her hand. After just 4 days, she breaks.
Indy is crying, asking if they're getting divorced. Benji is confused, asking if Dad did something wrong. The kids are suffering, and Angie can't bear to be the architect of their pain.
So she caves. She calls him and coldly tells him to come home, stating explicitly that she's doing it purely for the sake of the children, and issuing a final warning that if he ever steps out of line again, she is leaving for good.
But taking him back physically into the house doesn't mean she takes him back emotionally. They enter what the text chillingly describes as the cellmate phase. They share a house, they share meals with the kids, they even share a bed, but they do not touch.
They don't speak unless necessary. They don't even say goodnight. They are trapped in the suffocating prison of their profoundly broken marriage for weeks.
And eventually, the visual reminders become too much. To break out of that psychological prison, to stop seeing the ghost of those pink knickers every single time she walks into her own laundry room, Angie dictates a massive geographic cure.
She decides they must sell their beautiful home and move somewhere completely new, severing ties with the neighborhood where the betrayal occurred. She chooses Finchley, justifying it by saying it's closer to her mother.
Jack, who is still deeply in the doghouse and eager to play the reformed husband, agrees instantly, without a single word of debate.
He knows he has no bargaining power. But as Angie notes internally, she realizes a terrifying truth about her marriage. She married a man with 2 distinct identities. There is the adoring, fun, loving husband and father.
And then there is the thoughtless, selfish lad who desperately wishes he was still 22 and chatting up girls in a sticky-floored nightclub. She married the first one, but the second one snuck into the bargain like a Trojan horse, and she can never banish him.
Which brings us crashing back to the present moment on the freezing garden bench. The prospect of a new baby isn't just a logistical hurdle. It threatens to awaken that second identity. It threatens to shatter the incredibly fragile, tense peace she bought with the move to Finchley.
Sophie comes through the back gate to innocently drop off a plastic dinosaur toy Tom borrowed, finds Angie shivering on the bench, instantly reads the terror on her face, realizes what's happening, and immediately springs into action. Sophie runs back to her own bathroom and brings back a pregnancy test.
And here we hit the most heartbreaking, cruel contrast of the entire narrative. Sophie has a pregnancy test readily available in her bathroom cabinet because she and Alan have been secretly, desperately trying for months to conceive a 3rd child, and they are failing.
When Angie takes the test in the ensuite bathroom and sees that it is negative, just 1 line, she feels a massive rushing wave of relief. The crisis is averted, but that relief doesn't bring peace. Instead, it acts as a catalyst, triggering a much deeper, darker existential dread.
Because the false alarm forces her to look at the raw reality of the life she has constructed. The immediate threat of a baby is gone, but the baseline reality of her existence, being married to a man she cannot trust, constantly managing his moods, working a grueling job, and maintaining a perfect facade is still unbearable.
The adrenaline leaves her body, and she is left with nothing but profound emptiness.
This culminates in a terrifying meltdown later that evening. The house is loud. Her daughters, Indy and Ellie, are bickering aggressively over a stupid plastic hairband. The noise grates on Angie's frayed nerves until she snaps.
She marches over, violently yanks the hairband from Indy's hand with enough force to shock the girls, and throws it directly into the kitchen bin. The girls stare at her in stunned silence.
She retreats to the kitchen, pours a massive glass of red wine, sits at the island, but she can't even cry. The tears won't come. She just stares blankly at her phone, scrolling mindlessly through work emails until 11 p.m. when Jack finally gets home.
She realizes her entire life is a house of cards. She is exhausted from constantly playing the firefighter, and worse, she has lost the ability to even feel her own emotions. She is entirely numb.
It's a terrifying psychological state. It is burnout on a marital, maternal, and personal level. And while Angie is staring into the void in her kitchen, we see the parallel devastation happening next door with Sophie's quiet grief. These unspoken truths are starting to collide.
After Sophie hands Angie the test and returns to her own house, she goes into her bathroom. And her own period arrives that very day with a vengeance.
It is devastating.
It brings this monthly, crushing wave of disappointment and feelings of utter biological failure. It's a stark, cruel contrast of misaligned desires. Angie is paralyzed by the terror of the very fertility that Sophie is desperately, fruitlessly praying for.
The emotional state Sophie is in here is a brutal battle between financial scarcity and emotional lack. She sits on her sofa, holding a mug of scalding tea, and she brutally interrogates her own worth. She asks herself what she is actually good at.
She has no career to speak of. She looks at her freelance spreadsheet and sees that she earned a meager 2,610 pounds for the entire year. In a modern capitalist society that equates earning power with personal value, she feels like an absolute failure.
So what does she do? She projects all her desire for meaning, all her desperate need to feel successful, purposeful, and necessary onto the idea of having a third baby. A baby that biology seems to be definitively denying her, as Alan gently pointed out recently, that they aren't spring chickens anymore.
She looks across the fence at Angie's big, bustling, chaotic, unique family and feels this profound sense of lack. She is entirely unaware that the abundance she envies is literally crushing the woman she idolizes.
And this profound lack of communication, this desperate maintenance of the facade, even in the face of deep parallel pain, comes to a head at the Easter party preparations. Sophie isn't stupid. She has noticed Angie's deep withdrawal since the incident on the garden bench.
Angie has been dodging her calls, avoiding the fence. Sophie even cornered Jack on the school run to quiz him about it, but Jack, oblivious as always, just cheerfully brushed it off as a lingering cold and end-of-quarter work stress.
So it's the morning of the neighborhood Easter party. Angie finally comes over to Sophie's kitchen to help set up, and Sophie is arranging shop-bought cupcakes on a platter. She stops, looks at Angie, and finally pushes her. She says, "Look, something's on your mind. You haven't been yourself. I think it's time you talked about it."
She throws Angie a direct, undeniable lifeline, a chance to relieve the pressure. And how does Angie respond?
She lies. She completely, smoothly deflects. Her lawyer brain kicks into high gear to formulate a believable alibi to get Sophie off her case. She constructs a half-truth.
She blames her mother's failing health, mentioning that they are looking into sheltered accommodation, and then she claims she's having a massive panic over her work-life balance, saying she feels guilty for missing out on things at home.
And I have to aggressively question this choice. Why? Why maintain the lie with Sophie? Sophie was literally just with her on the garden bench. Sophie knows she was terrified of being pregnant. Sophie held the negative test in her own hands.
Why not just look at her friend and admit, hey, my marriage is actually hanging by a thread, I am bone-tired, and I am deeply traumatized by my husband's past infidelity.
Exactly.
Because for a woman like Angie, admitting the truth out loud makes it real. If she speaks those words to Sophie, a woman who explicitly vocally idolizes her and her marriage, the entire illusion evaporates.
If she confesses the truth about the pink thong, about Jack's cowardly escapism, about the torturous cellmate phase, she single-handedly destroys the Jack 2.0 narrative she has worked so hard to enforce.
She breaks the snow globe herself.
Precisely. And more importantly, she destroys the version of herself that she presents to the world. The impenetrable woman who has it all under control. The facade isn't just for the neighbors. It was the load-bearing pillar holding her own psyche together.
If she dismantles it with the ugly truth, she genuinely fears she won't survive the resulting collapse. She believes, with the tragic stoicism of the Ice Princess, that she has to carry this burden, deal with it, and get over it entirely by herself.
So she doubles down on the lie. She tells Sophie that what she really needs to fix her burnout is just a really good, long holiday. And Sophie, who is a fixer by nature, who is eager to help her friend, and who is feeling completely discombobulated by her own fertility grief, immediately lashes onto that lie and suggests a solution based on it.
She proposes a joint family holiday. She suggests they rent a massive villa or a couple of adjacent apartments somewhere hot like Spain for the summer.
And Angie actually considers it, but not for the reasons Sophie thinks. Angie considers it because her old friends from Greenwich, the people who actually knew her before the move, are actively phasing her out.
Her internal crisis caused her to neglect those relationships, ignoring texts and canceling dinners. And now she is isolated. A joint holiday with the Brennans offers a convenient, ready-made social safety net. It allows her to simulate a fun, active social life without having to confront the damage she's done to her older, more authentic friendships.
But take a second and picture this scenario. Think about the absolute combustible nature of this proposed holiday. You are taking these two families with all their hidden resentments, unfulfilled desires, and carefully guarded secrets, and you are putting them in a pressure cooker.
You have an overworked, deeply depressed wife hiding severe marital trauma. You have an insecure, charming husband who actively seeks out trouble when he feels bored or unappreciated. And you have a neighborly couple struggling with their own lack of passion, career failure, and hidden grief.
Now trap them in close quarters, day in and day out, under the baking summer sun, with endless bottles of cheap holiday wine flowing and absolutely nowhere to hide. What happens when these meticulously maintained suburban facades inevitably melt in the heat? When that fragile snow globe is finally smashed on the Spanish terracotta tiles, who is going to get cut by the glass?
Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision.
Right, yeah, like it's a binary thing.
Exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, well, there it is. Broken or not broken, it's clean and it's binary.
But today, we are taking a stack of psychological sources and behavioral research and a really fascinating domestic thriller to explore a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky.
Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is to uncover the invisible fractures in relationships. We want to dissect the anatomy of betrayal and understand why the stories we invent in our own heads are often far more destructive than reality.
And to do that, we are dropping you right into the middle of what looks like absolute picture-perfect paradise.
Oh, it's stunning. Picture this, right? You're in Kefalonia, Greece. You're staying in this massive 6-bedroom whitewashed villa.
Sounds terrible.
Right, I know. It's got blue shutters, a private pool, this gorgeous pergola that's like completely covered in vine leaves, offering shade from the midday sun.
Which you would definitely need.
For sure. And you're looking out over the Ionian Sea, miles away from the relentless grind of everyday civilization.
It is an environment meticulously designed to project absolute serenity. But what we're actually observing in this sun-drenched bubble is basically a psychological pressure cooker.
Oh, absolutely.
This setting, this luxurious isolation, it operates as a catalyst. It accelerates the quiet, invisible deterioration of two marriages that are sharing the space.
Because we have two neighboring couples from London on this trip. Angie and Jack represent the charismatic, high-earning power couple.
You're right, they have the money.
Yeah, and then Sophie and Alan are more traditional, financially constrained, and entirely overshadowed by them. Sophie is only experiencing this level of luxury because Angie arranged the trip and quietly subsidized it.
Which creates a massive power imbalance right from the start.
Totally. So when we see Sophie lying on a sun lounger, free from the constant demands of her kids, she is basically in a state of sensory shock.
And this setting is vital because of what it does to the human brain. Geographically and psychologically, these four adults have been removed from their everyday realities.
They're existing in this sort of liminal space.
Exactly. The rules of rainy London, the rules of their mundane, heavily structured daily lives, suddenly feel totally malleable.
And this suspension of the rules becomes glaringly obvious the very moment the spouses are separated. Angie and Alan have gone to the supermarket.
Right, to get supplies.
Yeah, and the kids are indoors. So it's just Sophie and Jack outside by the pool. Jack emerges from the villa carrying 2 ice-cold bottles of beer.
And the source material actually gives us this really intense, visceral detail here.
It does. It mentions the condensation running down the glass and how Sophie's mouth is literally watering. But her physical reaction isn't just about the beer.
No, not at all. She is hyper-attuned to Jack.
Right. He's in swimming trunks wearing designer aviator shades, projecting this effortless masculinity. And Sophie immediately feels this massive wave of inadequacy.
Because she feels quote-unquote frumpy compared to her best friend Angie.
Yes, but at the same time, she is completely magnetized by Jack's presence.
And that magnetism reveals the first structural crack. We really need to look at the machinery behind this reaction. Sophie is experiencing a massive internal conflict that's entirely disproportionate to a simple interaction over a drink.
Right. It's just a beer.
On the surface, yes, two friends are sharing a beverage, but beneath that surface, the psychological architecture of their neighborly boundary is beginning to warp. Sophie's self-esteem is incredibly fragile here.
Because she's always measuring herself against Angie.
Exactly. She is constantly measuring her own worth against Angie's success. So when Jack pays attention to her, it acts as a narcotic. It flatters her, but it also terrifies her because it forces her to confront her own latent desires.
And the physical environment immediately escalates that terror. They get into the pool, and the water is freezing.
Which triggers a physiological response.
Yeah, Sophie gets this sudden adrenaline rush, which she basically uses to mask her nervousness by showing off. She mentions she was an under-16s county champion swimmer.
A classic deflection tactic.
Right. And they start splashing each other, reverting to this furious, giggling, almost adolescent energy. And then Jack grabs her leg and pulls her underwater.
Which is such an intimate invasion of space.
It really is. They are floating beneath the surface, holding their breath. Sophie's lungs are burning. She sees Jack moving toward her through the water, and she just panics.
Her brain is screaming that he is about to kiss her.
Yes. She launches herself to the surface, scrambles out of the pool, wraps herself in a towel, and literally flees into the air-conditioned house. She hasn't actually done anything wrong, but she is consumed by this suffocating guilt.
To understand that guilt, we have to examine the psychology of boundaries. Water, both in literature and in behavioral analysis, often symbolizes the subconscious mind and the dissolution of social barriers.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. Down in that pool, stripped of their usual clothing and oxygen, the societal contracts that govern their lives in London simply evaporate.
But you have to ask why Sophie feels guilty when she is the one who fled. Like, she ran away.
The answer lies in the fact that guilt does not merely police our physical actions. It polices our desires. Sophie's panic isn't just about what Jack might do.
It's about what she might want him to do.
Exactly. Her panic stems from recognizing her own receptiveness. For a few seconds underwater, she really enjoyed being viewed not as Alan's dependable wife or as a mother, but as a deeply desirable woman.
Yeah.
The guilt is the psychological whiplash of recognizing her own capacity for transgression.
That is a staggering realization for her to have. And the way Angie handles the aftermath adds this completely bizarre layer to the dynamic.
Angie's reaction is fascinating.
Right. So Jack wanders back into the house, dripping wet, completely unbothered. He wraps his arms around Angie, playfully trying to pull down the strap of her dry clean-only dress.
And Angie just swats him away.
Yeah, she turns to Sophie and Alan and casually dismisses it by saying, you've met Holiday Jack. She explicitly creates an alter ego for her husband.
Yes. She claims Holiday Jack forgets he's a married father and reverts to an 18-year-old on a clubbing trip in Kavos. She tells them he's entirely harmless.
Which brings up a fascinating phenomenon in behavioral science, right? Like the moral holiday?
Yes, the moral holiday. Why do individuals utilize geography as a mechanism to suspend ethical boundaries? It is a form of aggressive compartmentalization.
So he's basically boxing up his bad behavior.
Exactly. Jack allows himself to act recklessly, to breach personal space, and to flirt aggressively because he can attribute the behavior to a temporary, geographically bound persona. Holiday Jack is a fictional container for his inappropriate impulses.
Because giving it a name sort of absolves the real Jack of any long-term responsibility.
Precisely.
But think about the danger of that for the people around him.
Yeah.
It's like when people say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But what happens when you have to fly back to rainy London and live next door to Vegas?
That is the perfect analogy.
Because the vacation alter ego isn't just about letting your hair down. It's a psychological loophole used to evade accountability.
I mean, have you ever met the holiday version of someone you know, and did it permanently change how you saw them back home?
It almost always does because you've seen the mask slip.
Right. If you find yourself needing a holiday version of your spouse to excuse their behavior, your primary life requires an audit. Because for Sophie standing in that living room, Angie's joke feels like a targeted weapon.
Oh, Sophie feels completely exposed.
Yeah, her cheeks are burning. She feels as though Angie is delivering a severe warning disguised as this breezy comment.
We really have to analyze what Angie's tolerance actually signifies here. You could argue she is simply a confident, high-powered woman who refuses to be ruffled by her husband's juvenile antics.
That's the image she wants to project, right?
Exactly. She likes control, and labeling his behavior as a harmless alter ego allows her to control the narrative.
I have to push back on that, though. Dismissing it as a quirk doesn't sound like confidence to me. It sounds like a desperate defense mechanism.
Because if she acknowledges that Jack is actively trying to seduce her best friend, the entire foundation of her perfect life collapses. She isn't controlling the narrative. She's literally putting her hands over her eyes.
That is a very precise distinction. She is utilizing denial to maintain homeostasis in her marriage.
Yeah, to keep the peace.
She refuses to confront his chronic need for external validation because doing so would require her to examine her own emotional absences in the relationship.
But her denial is super fragile. And the irony of this narrative is that the adults playing these subtle, dangerous games of attraction and denial are not the ones who shatter the illusion.
No, they aren't.
The Greek holiday bubble is violently burst, not by the adults, but by a teenager's heartbreak, which perfectly and accidentally strikes the mother's deepest insecurities.
We shift focus here to Angie's 13-year-old daughter, Indy.
Yes, Indy bursts into the villa with a face like thunder and slams her bedroom door. Angie, slipping effortlessly into the role of the nurturing, perfectly balanced mother, goes upstairs to console her.
Which is her playing the part of Superwoman again.
Exactly. She finds Indy lying face down on the bed, her long, dark hair acting as this physical shield. When Angie tries to comfort her, Indy violently rejects the affection and launches into a vicious verbal assault.
To contextualize this assault, we later learn the catalyst. Indy's boyfriend Noah was caught kissing another girl.
And it wasn't just a rumor.
No, a photograph of the betrayal went viral among their peers, and Noah ended the relationship via a humiliating 3-word text message. Indy is drowning in profound feelings of rejection, public humiliation, and powerlessness.
But Indy completely hides that from her mother. Instead of crying about Noah, Indy weaponizes her pain against Angie.
She goes on the offensive.
She really does. She accuses Angie of being a selfish, career-obsessed narcissist. She claims Angie treats her own children like inconvenient clients. And then she twists the knife.
The real blow.
Yeah, Indy accuses Angie of constantly belittling Jack, emasculating him, and suggests that Jack clearly prefers spending time with Sophie on this holiday.
The neurological and psychological mechanisms at play here are staggering. The teenage brain, specifically the amygdala, is highly reactive to peer rejection.
It feels like the end of the world to them.
Literally. Evolutionary biology wires adolescents to view social exclusion as a literal threat to survival. Because processing Noah's betrayal is too cognitively overwhelming for Indy, her ego defense mechanisms basically hijack her behavior.
She engages in classic psychological displacement.
Yes, exactly.
Could you explain exactly how that displacement functions in real time? Like, why choose her mother of all people?
Well, displacement occurs when a person shifts their emotional response from the original threatening target to a safer substitute target.
Okay, so Noah is the threat.
Right, Indy cannot direct her rage at Noah or her peer group because she still desperately craves their acceptance. Her brain instinctively seeks a safe receptacle for her cognitive dissonance. And her mother is the ultimate safe target.
Because mom isn't going to leave her.
Exactly. Indy's subconscious knows that no matter how cruel she is, her mother will not abandon her. So Indy takes her own visceral experience of romantic betrayal and projects a narrative of marital betrayal onto her parents.
She wants her mother to feel the exact same inadequacy, rejection, and humiliation that she is currently enduring.
It is a breathtakingly cruel yet highly effective strategy.
Teenagers are absolute savants at identifying the emotional weak points of their parents. Wait, so Indy's boyfriend cheats on her, and her immediate reaction is to verbally destroy her mom's marriage. Is she perceptive or just incredibly cruel?
It's a bit of both, honestly. Trauma makes us incredibly perceptive to the vulnerabilities of others.
That is so true. The text describes Angie initially squaring up to Indy like a lioness, showing dominance over a cub. But the second Indy mentions Jack preferring Sophie, all of Angie's authority just evaporates.
She is completely defeated.
Angie retreats to her own room, sits on the bed, and begins to shake. She looks in the mirror and realizes she is physically pale. In 60 seconds, her entire identity as an untouchable superwoman shatters.
Because Indy accidentally drilled directly into the core nerve, Angie uses all her energy to numb. The accusation forces Angie to confront terrifying questions.
Like, is her entire curated life a fraud?
Exactly. Do her children genuinely despise her? Does her husband desire her best friend? When a teenager targets a parent's flaws, it strips away the institutional authority of parenthood and exposes the intensely vulnerable, flawed adult underneath.
And the situation is compounded just 30 minutes later. Jack goes upstairs, and within moments, Indy tearfully confesses the entire truth about the viral photo and the text message to him.
So Jack succeeds where Angie failed.
Right. Jack comes downstairs, calmly briefs Angie on the situation, and handles it like a seasoned professional. But Angie doesn't feel relief that the crisis is solved.
No, she feels replaced.
She feels a sharp, piercing disappointment that her daughter confided in Jack instead of her. She looks at her husband and asks, "Am I a good mother?"
That specific question marks the death of the holiday illusion. The sun-drenched Greek bubble was, as the source text notes, merely a sticking plaster over a gaping wound.
From this moment, the geographical setting shifts back to the cold, rainy reality of London. And we witness these characters frantically attempting to restructure their lives to fill the internal voids exposed in Greece.
It's a complete shift in dynamics.
Let's follow them back to London. This brings up a fascinating paradox about human behavior. Why do we often sacrifice our own happiness to fix relationships that the other person doesn't even want fixed?
That's the million-dollar question.
Angie returns home, driven entirely by the devastating words spoken in Greece. She makes a drastic unilateral career decision. She demands flexible hours from her law firm partners so she can handle the afternoon school run.
Which is a huge professional risk.
Huge. She knowingly incinerates her chances of making partner voluntarily giving up her hard-earned status to become a more present mother.
From a family systems perspective, Angie's maneuver is highly disruptive. She is diagnosing her physical absence as the root cause of her family's dysfunction, and therefore prescribes her presence as the cure.
But she completely fails to recognize that an entire ecosystem has evolved around her ambition.
Exactly.
Jack's reaction is incredibly telling. He doesn't express gratitude. He is petulant. He enjoys his role as the primary, fun, part-time parent. He resents Angie encroaching on his domestic territory.
He actually asks, so do I have to up my hours at work again?
Yeah, he doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
And soon after, he gets this new documentary gig anyway. Furthermore, the older teenagers, Indy and Benji, are entirely indifferent to her new schedule.
So she makes this grand gesture for nothing.
Angie essentially performs this massive sacrifice for an audience that isn't paying attention. Think about a time you made a massive life change to please someone else, only to find out they like the old you better. That's exactly what Angie's doing here.
It illustrates the danger of operating on assumed guilt rather than open communication. Jack experiences secondary gain from Angie's demanding career. It allows him to be the emotional center of the household without the financial pressure.
Wow, that's so true.
When Angie tries to reclaim that center, she throws the system completely out of balance. But while Angie is aggressively shrinking her life to fit a traditional mold, she doesn't actually suit things. We see Sophie moving in the exact opposite direction.
Yes. Sophie has a quiet epiphany. While hiking in Greece, she realizes she has been sort of sleepwalking through her 30s.
She felt stuck in mundanity.
So back in London, she abandons her grueling, intensely stressful schedule of trying to conceive another baby. She gets a prescription for the pill taking control of her biology and enrolls in a course to become a certified swimming instructor.
And her husband, Alan, is wildly supportive, telling her she will be brilliant.
He is. The psychological continuity here is striking. Notice the recurring motif of water for Sophie.
Yes, water is such a powerful symbol for her. In Kefalonia, the private pool was an arena of anxiety, dangerous temptation, and blurred boundaries. It was an environment controlled by Angie's wealth.
Right, she was a guest in Angie's pool.
Back in London, the Municipal Leisure Centre pool becomes Sophie's sanctuary. It is a place of rigorous physical exertion and clarity. Through the disciplined act of swimming, Sophie reclaims her physical agency, her body, and her individual identity.
She stops defining herself solely through the lens of motherhood or her proximity to Angie. The transformation is visceral. Sophie gets a modern balayage haircut. She feels her muscles toning.
She's physically changing.
Yeah, the source describes this gloriously light sensation of finally shedding the obsessive daily pressure of getting pregnant. She radiates a new confidence.
It is a profound role reversal. Angie is desperately forcing herself, almost like a desperate school year's resolution, to be the perfect PTA mom, losing her professional standing, while the previously timid Sophie is stepping firmly into her own power.
It really forces us to examine our own motivations for change.
Absolutely. When we alter our life trajectory, are we doing it to align with our authentic self, as Sophie does? Or are we amputating parts of ourselves to appease the perceived judgments of others, as Angie is doing?
Because Angie's attempt to be everything to everyone quickly stretches her to the breaking point. She begins dropping crucial commitments in her personal life, which directly leads to an incredibly volatile evening between the absolute worst combination of neighbors.
Ah, yes, the aborted girls' night.
This sequence perfectly illustrates the danger of shared grievances. Sophie, riding high on her new confidence, plans a lavish night out in King's Cross to celebrate their respective life changes.
She goes all out.
She does. She gets her hair professionally blown out. She buys a beautiful new dress. She is literally humming Disney songs as she walks through the garden gate to Angie's house. But when she walks into the kitchen, she finds Jack completely alone.
Angie has entirely forgotten the plans and is out with corporate clients.
The emotional deflation is just immediate. Sophie has invested financially, losing a hefty restaurant deposit, but the psychological sting is far worse.
The forgotten plan confirms her deep-seated fear, that she values the friendship significantly more than Angie does. Sophie is confronted with her own lack of priority in Angie's life.
So feeling utterly dejected, Sophie decides she'll just pivot and take her husband out instead. She walks back next door to fetch Alan. But what does she find?
A very unromantic scene.
To say the least. It is 7:15 p.m., and Alan is deeply asleep on the sofa tucked under a woolen blanket top to tail with their young children. He is snoring. There's absolutely zero chance he is rallying for an upscale dinner in central London.
This is a critical juncture. Sophie has been rejected by her best friend's ambition and circumstantially rejected by her husband's exhaustion.
She is standing in the middle of her life feeling entirely invisible.
And Jack, who possesses an acute predatory intelligence, recognizes that void immediately.
He seizes the moment. Jack runs upstairs and comes back down wearing a formal dinner shirt and a silk tie over a pair of gray sweatpants.
It's a charming, ridiculous visual.
It is. He tells Sophie, if you can't go to the restaurant, I'm bringing the restaurant to you. He orders expensive takeaway pizza and begins aggressively mixing incredibly potent cocktails for her.
On the surface, it seems like a great guy trying to salvage a ruined evening for his wife's friend.
Right.
You could argue Jack is just a lonely guy trying to be hospitable. Or maybe a guy having a midlife crisis desperate for some reckless fun. But if we analyze the dialogue, we see a much darker pattern.
Oh, it's super dark.
Jack actively cultivates a trauma bond based on mutual resentment. He doesn't just validate Sophie's disappointment, he amplifies it by revealing his own grievances.
They bond over feeling like, quote-unquote, collateral damage to Angie's ambition.
Yes. He complains that Angie struggled to bond with their children when they were infants, painting himself as the overworked, underappreciated martyr.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I have to push back on Jack's character here. Telling a vulnerable neighbor, you're a good girl, aren't you? That's not friendly neighbor talk.
No, it's not.
That's a test. He's shaking the fence to see if the gate is unlocked, isn't he? Bonding with a friend's spouse over your friend's flaws crosses a massive line of loyalty.
Your assessment is completely accurate. He is testing the perimeter defenses by asking if she is a good girl. He is directly challenging her self-perception. He is asking her to prove that she is capable of rebellion.
Sophie knows she is betraying Angie by listening, but the alcohol and her own bruised ego lower her defenses.
And Jack creates a micro-narrative in that kitchen where he and Sophie are the tragic, neglected victims of Angie's monstrous ambition. This provides them both with plausible deniability.
Right, like they aren't betraying their spouses, they are simply seeking the comfort they are denied at home. The tension in the room becomes suffocating.
And the only thing that shatters that tension is a literal physical intervention.
Upstairs, little Freddie falls out of bed and starts wailing. The thud on the floor acts like a bucket of ice water. They race upstairs and the spell is just broken.
Reality reasserts itself.
Exactly. By the time the children are settled, the pizza is stone cold. Sophie regains her senses and insists on leaving. Jack practically begs her to stay for another drink, looking visibly crestfallen.
If that child hadn't fallen out of bed, what would have happened in that kitchen? The trajectory of all 4 lives likely would have changed that night.
It is a terrifying illustration of how proximity, opportunity, and shared resentment can override years of moral conditioning in a matter of minutes.
But the supreme irony of this narrative is that while Jack and Sophie are playing these reckless games of hypothetical infidelity in the kitchen, a vastly more destructive secret is already rotting the foundation of the house next door.
Yes, which brings us to the most catastrophic moment in the story. While the adults are flirting with disaster playing these emotional games, it is the youth, specifically 13-year-old Indy, who inadvertently unearths the darkest secret of all.
The environmental storytelling in this sequence is essential to understanding the psychological impact of the discovery.
Let's set the scene. It is a blustery, freezing December afternoon. Indy has had a massive falling out with her best friend at school. Feeling entirely alienated, she forges a dentist note from her mother and skips school early.
She just wants to escape.
Her only goal is to sneak into the sanctuary of her own home raid, the chocolate stash, and play on her iPad. As she walks down her street, she specifically averts her eyes from the tacky illuminated reindeer in the Brennan's front yard, wanting to avoid any interaction with the neighbors.
Notice the stark contrast here. The external world is freezing harsh and socially hostile to Indy. She is seeking the physical warmth and the psychological safety of her childhood home.
Right, she wants to feel safe.
She is retreating from the complexities of adolescence into the dependable structure provided by her parents.
But that structure is about to be annihilated. Indy unlocks the front door, takes off her shoes to avoid making a mess, and hears a strange noise coming from the loft conversion, which is her parents' bedroom.
And she assumes someone is home.
Right, so she decides to go upstairs, complain about severe period cramps, secure a hot water bottle, and be left alone. She creeps up the carpeted stairs silently, but when she reaches the doorway of the bedroom, she freezes in terror.
She looks inside and she sees 2 adults entirely naked writhing on the bed in the middle of the afternoon having sex.
And then the text delivers the realization that drops the floor out from under the reader and from under Indy, and only one of them was her parent.
It is Angie and Alan.
her high-powered perfectionist mother, and the quiet, unassuming neighbor. The text describes Indy feeling a cold sickness seep into her bones. She views it as the most grotesque, horrifying thing she has ever witnessed in her life.
We really must explore the catastrophic neurological impact of this moment. In the psychology of childhood development, parents exist as an imago.
An imago, what is that exactly?
It's an idealized, semi-divine representation of authority and morality. They are the architects of the child's reality. To witness the primal, vulnerable act of sex is jarring enough for an adolescent.
Yeah, that's always awkward.
But to witness the profound moral hypocrisy of an affair with a neighbor shatters the parental imago instantly and irrevocably. Indy's entire paradigm of trust disintegrates in a single heartbeat.
She realizes the adults who police her behavior, who tell her right from wrong, are vile, selfish hypocrites. They've ruined her life.
And her physical reaction is fascinating here. Look at what she doesn't do. She doesn't scream. She doesn't storm into the room and confront them.
No, she backs away in total silence. She creeps back down the stairs, forces her feet into her shoes, and silently flees her own house. She runs out into the freezing December wind without even grabbing a coat, tears streaming down her face.
Her physical flight mirrors her psychological state. She has been abruptly, violently cast out the warmth of her childhood illusion into the freezing, cynical reality of adult betrayal.
So she heads to the local municipal park, which is deserted in the winter cold, and she walks straight to the children's playground. She sits on a childhood swing and begins to pump her legs, pushing herself higher and higher into the air.
Why a swing, though? Why does a teenager who just uncovered a massive sexual betrayal immediately seek out a piece of playground equipment?
That's a great question.
Because it is a profound psychological regression. The text explicitly notes that Indy loved the swings as a small child. The feeling of weightlessness, the illusion of flying away.
A desperate final grasp at her fading childhood.
Exactly. In a moment of overwhelming trauma, the brain seeks out a familiar, self-soothing mechanism. The rhythmic to and fro motion of the swing is an attempt to regulate her spiked nervous system.
It's like she's rocking herself.
But it is also a mourning process. As she swings in the freezing air, she intuitively understands that she can never return to the innocence of the girl who used to play there. Her childhood is officially dead.
Put yourself in Indy's shoes for a second. This isn't just leverage. It is emotional quicksand. You hold a secret that will detonate two entirely separate families, including your own. Your best friends next door, their foundational security will be destroyed. Do you pull out your phone and send a text to your dad right then and there to blow it all up?
Most adults would act on impulse.
But Indy chooses to wait. And her patience is terrifying.
The longer she sits on that secret, the deeper she sinks into adult cynicism. She decides to embrace a cold adult desire for revenge. She transitions from a traumatized child into a calculating agent of retribution.
She decides that simple exposure is insufficient, right? She wants maximum punishment. She returns home and begins acting incredibly sweet and affectionate toward her mother, keeping it entirely hidden.
Which ushers in the surreal, maddening period of the story, the ticking time bomb of paranoia. While the teenager holds the nuclear launch codes to this explosive secret, the actual guilty party, Angie, is spiraling into a severe paranoid delusion.
Angie is hunting for betrayal in every single corner of her life except in her own mirror. Post-holiday, Angie becomes absolutely convinced that Jack is having an affair.
The suppressed guilt of Angie's affair with Alan has mutated into a psychological virus.
She views everyone as a threat. A pretty female colleague calls the house to speak to Jack. Angie views her as an enemy. They go to their usual weekend brunch spot, and the young waitress's face lights up when Jack walks in. Angie decides they're sleeping together.
Even though Jack casually attributes it to just being a good tipper.
Right. The other mothers at the school gates who casually ask where Jack is suspects in a grand conspiracy.
We really have to delve into the clinical mechanics of this. This is a textbook extreme manifestation of Melanie Klein's theory of projective identification.
Projective identification.
Yes. Angie is carrying an immense toxic load of secret guilt regarding her own affair. This guilt generates severe cognitive dissonance because Angie's core identity relies on being capable, moral, and superior. To alleviate the crushing internal pressure, her subconscious actively projects her own unfaithfulness onto Jack.
So she is basically rewriting reality to survive her own actions.
Precisely. If Jack is a chronic cheater, then Angie's affair is no longer a horrific betrayal. It is simply justifiable retaliation. It balances the moral ledger.
Wow.
Her frantic paranoia isn't actually about Jack's behavior at all. It is a complex defense mechanism shielding her from her own self-loathing.
No. But the wildest detail is who she excludes from her paranoia. Out of all the women she meticulously scrutinizes, Angie explicitly clears Sophie. The text states that suspecting Sophie was one step too far even for Angie.
Yes, she gives her a pass.
Why on earth does she give a free pass to the one woman her husband was actually pulling underwater in a swimming pool?
Because suspecting Sophie would force Angie's subconscious to confront the symmetrical reality of her own betrayal. Angie is actively sleeping with Sophie's husband. If she allows her brain to visualize Jack sleeping with Sophie, the mirrored image is too psychologically devastating.
It would completely annihilate the boundaries of her friendship.
Exactly. She must aggressively maintain Sophie's purity in her mind to preserve the last shred of her own perceived morality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You, the listener, know that Angie is the one sleeping with Alan. But Angie is making herself physically sick, covertly checking Jack's phone and emails at night, hunting for any fragment of evidence.
When she finds nothing, the relief lasts for maybe an hour before the anxiety inevitably resets.
It's like a bank robber calling the police because they think someone stole their getaway car. It is exhausting just reading about it. The stress manifests physically. She flinches when Jack tries to touch her.
And the dramatic irony is that Jack notices she is crumbling and he expresses genuine concern.
He does. He gently tells her she is burning out from trying to work flexible hours and manage the house.
Jack's compassion highlights the absolute tragedy of their communication breakdown. He believes she is suffering from the modern epidemic of maternal burnout. He has absolutely no idea she is suffocating under the weight of her own infidelity and projected paranoia.
Think about your own calendar for a second. When Angie feels this pressure, she leans into frantic manic busyness. She is obsessively wrapping perfectly color-coordinated Christmas presents.
She's trying to hold together a perfect Christmas.
Yeah, she's managing the logistical nightmare of moving her elderly mother into sheltered accommodation. She volunteers to organize the school winter fair. She is booking pantomime tickets. Are you booking your life back to back because you are genuinely productive or because you are terrified of what you'll have to think about if you sit in an empty, quiet room?
Manic defense is a highly common avoidance mechanism. If you keep moving at a relentless pace, your brain doesn't have the bandwidth to process the moral wreckage of your decisions. Angie is utilizing her superwoman productivity to quite literally outrun her conscience.
And while Angie is running, Indy is setting a trap. Consider the dark comedy of Indy's behavior during this period. Indy goes Christmas shopping with Angie. They get facials. They act like this blossoming, deeply bonded mother-daughter duo.
Angie sits in the spa profoundly relieved, thinking her flexible working hours have successfully repaired their relationship.
In reality, Indy is operating like an apex predator playing with its food. She is meticulously constructing the architecture of an ambush. She understands a fundamental rule of psychological warfare. To inflict the maximum amount of devastation, you must first allow your target to feel entirely unshakably safe.
Which brings us to the climax of the narrative. New Year's Eve, the midnight toast.
All of these volatile threads, Angie's crushing projected guilt, Jack and Sophie's dangerous flirtations, and Indy's calculated rage finally collide in a spectacular, inescapable public detonation.
The temporal setting of New Year's Eve is loaded with psychological symbolism. It is the universal holiday dedicated to fresh starts, to leaving the sins of the past behind and wiping the slate clean.
And Indy chooses this specific night to ensure that the past cannot be left behind. Jack invites the Brennans over to celebrate. Sophie initially resists because of the awkward tension with Angie, but Jack deploys his charm and she caves.
When Sophie arrives, she looks incredible. She's glowing with new confidence from her swimming career.
Jack is wearing a ridiculous novelty headband with sparkly bouncing balls on it, aggressively distributing potent Jack Special martinis.
The sensory environment is deliberately crafted to induce chaos and lower inhibitions. The narrative describes Gangnam Style thumping through the speakers, the adults engaging in ridiculous, exaggerated dancing, and the physical exhaustion of the younger children who eventually pass out and are carried upstairs.
It is an atmosphere designed to blur the edges of reality. Sophie even agrees to take tequila shots, with Jack completely letting her guard down. She feels the sharp sting of the salt and lime.
She genuinely believes the incoming year is going to be spectacular.
Meanwhile, Angie and Indy have spent the day getting pampered and descend the stairs looking like a supermodel dream team in matching little black dresses.
Oh.
Angie looks at her daughter with overwhelming pride, completely oblivious to the guillotine poised above her neck.
The theatricality of Indy's execution is astounding. We must consider the debate of justice versus cruelty here. She possessed the information for weeks. She could have confided in her father privately. She could have hurled the accusation during a private argument with her mother.
Instead, she waits for the countdown. 10, 9, 8. She holds her fire until the exact second of maximum joy, intoxication, and hope for the future.
The clock strikes midnight. The room erupts in cheers. Everyone is hugging and kissing. Sophie gives Alan a quick, obligatory peck. Jack grabs Sophie and playfully spins her around.
And then 13-year-old Indy steps into the dead center of the room. She is holding a champagne flute filled with lemonade. She announces in a clear, carrying voice that she would like to propose a toast.
Analyze her physical command of the space. She slowly looks around the room, making eye contact with each adult. She has assumed total directorial control of the narrative.
She locks eyes with Sophie. And before she drops the bomb, Indy issues a precise apology. "I'm sorry, Sophie. You're a nice person. You don't deserve this."
That apology is the most chilling element of the scene. It proves that Indy is not lashing out blindly in a trauma response. She retains the cognitive clarity to recognize the true innocent victim in the room.
Right. She knows Sophie is innocent.
She executes her revenge with the cold precision of a surgeon deliberately separating the guilty from the innocent before making the lethal incision. It demonstrates a level of emotional calculation that borders on sociopathy born entirely of trauma.
Is Indy's behavior here justified? She was traumatized by what she saw, but to execute this in front of a room full of people, including the innocent spouse, is this justice or just cruelty?
That's a moral gray area.
Then Indy turns, raises her glass of lemonade, and delivers the sentence that incinerates their lives. To Mum and Alan, who have been having it off behind everyone's backs, I hope you'll be very happy together.
The immediate fallout is a master study in crisis response. The music is abruptly silenced. The sudden quiet is deafening.
Jack's initial drunken confusion instantly hardens into a furious, guttural demand. What the hell is going on?
Alan, the steady, dependable neighbor, instantly crumbles under the weight of exposure. He collapses onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands, completely incapable of facing the reality of his betrayal. Sophie is left in utter bewilderment.
But Angie's reaction is the most revealing. She stands frozen. But her immediate internal monologue isn't about the moral devastation she has caused.
You know, her corporate legal training kicks in.
Exactly. Her brain rapidly cycles through risk assessment. How did Indy find out? What exactly did she see? How much does she actually know?
She looks at Alan, realizes he is entirely useless, and decides she must control the narrative. She literally attempts to compartmentalize her crumbling reality as if she is representing a hostile client in a boardroom.
It is the ultimate tragic failure of her superwoman persona. She attempts to utilize professional detachment to manage a deeply intimate, emotional catastrophe, and it is entirely insufficient. The illusion is officially dead.
With the bomb successfully detonated in the living room, the narrative forcefully halts. We are thrust into a flashback to answer the burning question that every single person in that room and everyone listening right now is asking.
How on earth did the flawless, controlling Angie end up having sex on a kitchen counter with the incredibly boring Alan?
This requires us to dissect the anatomy of the betrayal. We must break down the grim psychology of the specific affair because it violently subverts every romantic trope associated with infidelity.
Exactly. There was no grand sweeping romance. There were no stolen passionate glances across a crowded room. It began with a mundane legal case.
Angie was defending a female client who had violently assaulted her fiancé after discovering him having sex with a bridesmaid on their kitchen table.
As Angie analyzes the profile of the cheating fiancé, her brain begins to forcefully rearrange the puzzle pieces of her own marriage. She recalls Jack's late nights at the office, the times he was unreachable, the random pink thong she found in his laundry years ago.
She experiences a catastrophic paradigm shift. Based on circumstantial evidence and her own deep-seated insecurities, she convinces herself that Jack has been chronically, serially unfaithful for the entirety of their marriage.
She adopts the identity of a victim who has been subjected to a massive long-term deception. The emotional weight of this realization, which is fundamentally an invention, triggers a complete psychological collapse.
Overwhelmed by panic that her entire marriage was a lie, she drops to her kitchen floor and begins violently sobbing.
And who happens to knock on the back door at that exact moment to borrow a splash of milk? Alan. Steady, unassuming Alan, taking a break from doing his invoicing with his dirty pair of work shoes taken off at the door.
He walks into the kitchen and finds this historically untouchable, powerful woman broken on the tiles. He doesn't panic.
He gently takes the milk bottle from her trembling hand, puts the kettle on, makes her a cup of tea, and simply sits and listens.
Alan performs emotional triage. Angie unloads years of suppressed anxiety, her intense frustration with Jack, and her terrifying secret fear that her children love her husband more than they love her.
Alan listens with absolute attention and then puts his arm around her shoulders. The text is incredibly precise about Angie's internal state in this moment.
She does not feel a spark of passion. She feels for the first time in years entirely safe.
But that safety rapidly mutates into something incredibly dark. Power. A few days later, Alan returns to the house to check on her well-being.
He tells her with absolute sincerity that she deserves vastly better than Jack. He validates every single insecurity she possesses. He essentially worships her.
And Angie realizes with a jolt of adrenaline that she holds absolute dictatorial power over this man. He is visibly intimidated by her intellect and status, yet deeply physically attracted to her.
The internal logic Angie uses to justify crossing the final boundary is a masterclass in post hoc rationalization. She does not initiate sex with Alan out of romantic desire.
No, it's about power control and emotional triage.
She initiates sex to reclaim dominance over her environment. She feels she is losing her husband, losing her children's affection, and losing her professional edge. Alan is a controllable, safe, manageable variable.
Furthermore, she weaponizes her unproven conviction that Jack is a cheater as moral armor. Her internal monologue basically dictates, if Jack cheated on me, then sleeping with Alan simply balances the scales.
It is a transactional, retributive act of infidelity. She convinced herself that Jack must have cheated in the past, so this makes them even.
She stands in her kitchen and deliberately coolly unbuttons her dress, just to prove she still has power over a man. Not out of lust, but simply to watch Alan struggle between his moral loyalty to his wife and his overwhelming desire for her.
She pulls him in, and they have sex right there on the kitchen counter next to their tepid cups of coffee left over from the act.
And the most tragic irony of it all is the immediate aftermath. It is a total anticlimax. They redress in awkward silence. Alan immediately asks her to pretend the encounter never occurred.
Because the affair was devoid of genuine connection. It functioned as an emotional sticking plaster. It was a temporary, desperate high designed to make Angie feel powerful and desired in a moment when she felt profoundly weak and rejected.
They occasionally resume the affair over the following months, but the encounters are triggered entirely by Angie's external stresses, such as Indy's cruel words in Greece. When Angie feels rejected by her daughter, she summons Alan to the house purely for validation.
It's just a mechanism to cope.
But it is an empty exercise. In fact, consider the tragic irony of the ending. By the time New Year's Eve rolls around, the affair has already been dead for weeks.
That is the ultimate devastating irony of the climax. Alan had terminated the affair weeks prior to Christmas. He told her he could no longer bear the guilt.
And Angie realized, with chilling apathy, that she didn't even care about him. Alan was a drug she had built a tolerance to and no longer required. They had successfully buried the indiscretion.
If Indy hadn't had a fight with her friend, forged that dentist note, and walked into her house on that specific blustery December afternoon, the secret might have stayed buried in the dark forever. Two families wouldn't have been utterly destroyed.
It forces a profound confrontation with the fragility of the psychological structures we build our lives upon. Angie constructed her reality on the foundation of her own assumed perfection and the unproven sins of her husband. She detonated her actual life to avenge a fantasy she created in her own mind.
It's a terrifying thought.
It leaves us with a haunting realization to audit in our own lives. Angie destroyed her closest friendship with Sophie. She imploded her marriage to Jack, and she irrevocably shattered her daughter's innocence. And she engineered all of this destruction for an affair she didn't even enjoy with a man she didn't love to get revenge on her husband for a crime she had no actual proof he ever committed. It demands that we ask ourselves, when we look at the conflicts, the paranoia, and the chaos in our own lives, how much of it is caused by what is actually happening to us, and how much is caused by the stories we invent to survive ourselves.
So if you were to walk into your living room tonight and catch your spouse in this deeply compromising situation with your absolute best friend, you probably think you know exactly how you'd react.
Oh yeah, everyone thinks they know.
Right. Like you envision the screaming, the crying, the immediate just fiery rage.
The whole cinematic reaction.
Exactly. It's what we've been socially conditioned to expect. But the neurological data shows that in these moments of sudden, catastrophic betrayal, our brains actually do something entirely different.
Something completely counterintuitive.
Right, something almost perverse, honestly. They make us laugh.
Yeah, it's wild to see it happen in real life.
It really is. So we are analyzing this deeply complex narrative source today, the Brennan and Taylor case, to dissect the exact anatomy of a domestic betrayal.
It is a fascinating case study.
It totally is, because our mission here is to map out not just, what happens when a secret destroys two families, but to look at the underlying behavioral science.
Right, the hidden psychological mechanisms.
Yeah, and the really terrifying realities of how human beings how they curate their lives. And this entire structural collapse starts with one single agonizing moment.
It does. And the setting here is so critical to understanding the psychological impact on everyone involved.
Paint the picture for us.
Okay, so we were at a New Year's Eve party. The glasses are raised. The air in the living room is just thick with that warm, fuzzy feeling of chosen family.
The best kind of party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have these two families, the Brennans and the Taylors, who, they don't just live next door to each other. They essentially share a life.
Right. They share a garden gate.
They share meals, they share childcare, and they share secrets. And standing there in the middle of all this, holding a glass and asking for the room's attention is 13-year-old Indy Taylor.
Right. And, I mean, as a guest in that room, you expect a teenager to say something awkwardly sweet.
Right. Or maybe complain about homework.
Yeah. Or make some slightly inappropriate joke, but instead she clears her throat and drops a live psychological grenade right onto the coffee table.
A massive grenade.
She plainly reveals to the entire room that her mother, Angie, has been sleeping with the neighbor's husband, Alan.
The immediate visceral physiology of the room in the seconds that follow is, well, it's a masterclass in human trauma responses.
Because no one knows what to do.
Exactly. The human brain simply cannot process a paradigm shift of that magnitude in real time.
It just shorts out.
Yeah. When incoming data violently contradicts our foundational reality, the brain experiences this massive cognitive bottleneck.
Which brings us back to that perverse reaction I mentioned earlier. Sophie, Alan's wife, her very first reaction isn't to throw her drink or scream.
No, not at all.
She laughs. She actually chuckles.
It's so jarring to read, but it's completely scientifically sound. It's known as incongruity resolution theory in psychology.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, usually we talk about it with humor, but here it's operating as a desperate defense mechanism. The brain receives a piece of information like, my husband is sleeping with my best friend, that is so completely misaligned with its established model of reality.
That it just can't fit into the filing cabinet.
Right. So it attempts to resolve the incongruity by categorizing it as a joke. Sophie genuinely thinks Indy is just acting out.
Like she's trying to cause a bizarre theatrical rift between her own parents.
Exactly. The laughter is basically the brain's way of frantically hitting the reject button on reality.
It's the mind trying to protect itself from an incoming missile. I love that imagery. But then, you look at the other adults in the room and the reactions just wildly diverge.
Oh, completely.
Take Jack, Angie's husband. He shatters the illusion immediately. He doesn't laugh at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, he demands, what the F is going on? He instantly knows on some deep somatic gut level that it's true.
He feels it in his body before his brain even processes it.
Right. But the reaction I really want to dissect, because it makes me so angry, belongs to Alan. The supposed safe guy. The knight in shining armor. In this moment of absolute world-ending crisis, he turns into a completely useless lump of coal.
He really does.
He buries his head in his hands. He literally loses his voice. He won't look at Sophie. He won't look at Jack.
To understand Alan and Jack here, we really have to look at how the autonomic nervous system manages acute, inescapable threat.
Okay, yeah, let's get into the nervous system stuff.
So Jack immediately drops into a hyper-aroused, pragmatic state. I like to think of Jack's reaction as a submarine captain dealing with a catastrophic hull breach.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. He instantly starts sealing bulkheads. He compartmentalizes the emotional devastation of his wife's betrayal in order to keep the rest of the ship from drowning.
Meaning his kids who are upstairs.
Exactly. It is a massive influx of adrenaline and cortisol, but it's directed into pure executive function.
He's sealing off the flooded compartments. And then there's Alan.
Right. Alan goes into a profound dorsal vagal shutdown.
Dorsal vagal shutdown. What does that actually look like?
It's the freeze response at its most extreme.
Yeah.
Animals use this when they're caught by a predator and escape is impossible.
Like a possum playing dead.
Literally. Their heart rate drops, They play dead, and they just hope the predator loses interest. Alan's entire identity as the good guy has just been vaporized in front of his wife, his mistress, and his neighbor.
His whole ego just collapses.
The psychological pain of that ego death is so intense that his nervous system simply pulls the plug. He folds in on himself because he lacks the psychological architecture to navigate the confrontation.
Which, conveniently, and I would argue cowardly, leaves Angie to manage the entire fallout.
It does.
And her approach to the confession dynamics is incredibly revealing. She immediately goes into damage control mode.
Deploying classic minimizing language.
Yes. Listen to the specific script she uses. She says, "It was a mistake. It only happened a few times. It didn't mean anything. We both regretted it."
She is trying to retroactively shrink the blast radius of the bomb her daughter just set off.
It's just so manipulative.
What's a textbook display of cognitive dissonance reduction? Angie cannot reconcile her view of herself as a good person with the reality of what she has just done.
So she has to rewrite the narrative.
Exactly. She attempts to linguistically sanitize the betrayal. By calling it a mistake rather than, a series of calculated deceptive choices, she removes her own agency.
She's making it sound like she just tripped and fell into bed with him.
Right. She's desperately trying to convince herself as much as she's trying to convince Jack and Sophie.
But Jack, our submarine captain, he isn't having it. He presses her. He demands timelines. He says, when did it start?
He needs the data.
He needs the data. And here is where I genuinely want to reach through the pages and just shake Alan. Because Alan, who has been completely mute this entire time, he finally speaks up.
And you think this is it?
Right. You think, okay, he's going to take some shred of responsibility here. He's going to own his actions. But he just looks at Angie and says, "Tell them, Angie. Tell them the truth."
The irony is absolutely staggering.
It's disgusting.
He breaks his silence, only to pass the burden of the confession back to the woman he cheated with. He completely abdicates responsibility in the very moment his wife needs to hear it from him the most.
It's so weak.
It is. It's a profound cowardice that adds a devastating secondary layer of betrayal for Sophie. It's not just that he committed the act, it's that he won't even stand up and look her in the eye to admit it.
Okay, hold on, though. I really want to push back on analyzing Alan as just a passive victim of a freeze response.
Okay, let's hear it.
I understand the polyvagal theory. I get the dorsal vagal shutdown stuff. But calling it a biological reflex, I think it gives him way too much grace.
You think it's more calculated than that?
I think there is a deep, insidious entitlement in his silence. He isn't just playing dead. He is actively relying on the women in the room to do the emotional heavy lifting of dismantling the bomb he helped build.
Oh, that is a phenomenal point.
Right. He expects Angie to take the bullets for him.
You're absolutely right. The physiological freeze response doesn't negate the underlying patriarchal expectation of emotional labor. His silence is both a biological shutdown and a deeply entrenched social privilege.
He expects to be shielded from the consequences of his own actions because he's a man.
Exactly. He's used to women cleaning up the mess.
Yes. And while Angie is talking, trying to minimize the timeline, we have to unpack the sickening realization that hits Sophie, because Sophie's brain is finally coming out of that incongruity resolution.
The joke phase is over.
It's over. She's working in overdrive, doing that terrible retroactive math we all do when we realize our reality is a fabrication.
Connecting the dots.
Right. And she connects the dots back to an earlier event, a pregnancy scare Angie had, and the bottom just completely drops out of Sophie's world.
It's a devastating moment.
She realizes that Angie's sheer terror back then wasn't just about the inconvenience of having a fourth baby. Angie was terrified because she genuinely didn't know if the father was her husband, Jack or Alan.
And that realization, that is the precise moment the betrayal mutates from a physical act of infidelity into a profound psychological violation.
It's so much deeper than sex.
Think about the emotional mechanics of that memory for Sophie. She desperately wanted another baby herself. She remembers sitting on a bed, comforting Angie, holding her hand, pouring her own emotional resources into consoling her friend.
Giving her everything.
And now, retroactively, that entire memory is poisoned. She was comforting the woman who was sleeping with her husband about a pregnancy that could have been his.
It's Machiavellian cruelty. Whether Angie intended it that way or not, the result is just brutal. I mean, just imagine being in Sophie's shoes for a second. Put yourself right there in that room.
It's hard to even fathom.
The two people who always had your back, your best friend next door, the woman you trusted with your deepest insecurities, and your husband, the man you built your entire life around, simultaneously becoming the source of your deepest, most agonizing betrayal.
It's a total collapse of her support system.
In the span of a 3-minute toast, the entire foundational architecture of your life is proven to be made of papier-mâché.
Which makes the transition from the chaotic, explosive environment of the Taylor's living room to the walk back to the Brennan house so atmospherically tense.
It really is.
It's a masterclass in the sudden isolation of trauma.
The sensory details of this transition are just incredible. They walk out the door and step into the freezing night air. It's New Year's Eve, remember?
Right, the contrast is huge.
The world around them is literally exploding with fireworks and celebration. People are cheering, and they are walking the few yards back to their house in absolute suffocating silence.
Just dead quiet.
And when they get inside, Sophie rejects the deeply ingrained British instinct to put the kettle on for tea.
Which tells you how serious this is.
Exactly. She demands whiskey. And not just any whiskey, the expensive single malt she usually never touches.
We really have to view that whiskey through the lens of somatic grounding.
Somatic grounding. Okay.
Yeah. Trauma violently disconnects the mind from the body. You feel like you're floating or like you aren't real. Sophie doesn't just want the alcohol for its intoxicating effects.
She wants to feel something.
Right. She needs the sharp burning sensation in her throat and chest to physically anchor her back to the present moment. She is seeking a harsh sensory input to match the internal state of devastation she is experiencing.
And while she's sitting at the kitchen table trying to ground herself, her hands are shaking violently, and she's clutching this drawing.
Oh, the drawing.
It's a picture her daughter Katie drew earlier that exact same day. A picture of the four of them, Alan, Sophie, the two kids, holding hands under a rainbow.
It's what psychologists call a cognitive artifact, right?
A physical representation of a psychological concept.
Precisely. It is the physical manifestation of her belief in the perfect family of four.
And it's just ripped to shreds.
The juxtaposition of that innocent, idealized, brightly colored image against the shattered reality of the man sitting across the table from her is agonizing. It highlights the massive dissonance between the life she thought she was living this morning and the life she is actually living tonight.
And sitting across that table is Alan. Sophie, finding some bizarre reservoir of strength, demands an explanation. She asks the simplest, heaviest question you can ask. Why?
And his answer.
Alan's defense, or complete lack thereof, is just agonizing to witness. He claims they were in a rut. He blames the baby-making pressure for extinguishing the spark in their marriage. And then he actually says he just got carried away.
What is genuinely fascinating here is how mundane and pathetic his excuse is.
It's insulting.
It completely fails to match the catastrophic scale of the destruction he's caused. He is applying a generic sitcom-level trope of marital dissatisfaction to justify blowing up the lives of two entire families.
Things were a bit boring, so I detonated our universe.
Exactly. By saying things were a bit boring and he wanted excitement, he is utilizing a socially recognizable script to minimize the extreme agency he exercised in repeatedly making the choice to sleep with his neighbor.
I would have thrown the whiskey in his face, honestly.
Most people would.
But Sophie's reaction is brilliant because she completely refuses to accept that script. She scoffs at his attempt to intellectualize it as some complex marital issue. She drops this retort that cuts right through all of his pathetic noise. What are you, a teenage boy?
It's a devastatingly effective deconstruction of his ego.
Exactly. She lays it out bare from an evolutionary psychology standpoint. She strips away the romance, the supposed rut, and reduces it to crude opportunism.
Just raw biology.
She says. You saw a sexy woman, the opportunity presented itself, and you simply thought with your dick. There was no deep existential longing. It was sheer biological opportunism, and the worst part, the absolute most pathetic moment.
Well, he agrees with her.
Yes. Alan basically just nods and says, possibly yes.
This exchange forces us to analyze the illusion of safety, which is really the bleeding core of Sophie's heartbreak.
The illusion of safety.
Yeah. If we look at mate selection theory, women often balance the desire for exciting, high-risk partners with the need for stable, predictable, low-risk partners for long-term rearing.
The bad boy versus the nice guy.
Right. And Sophie specifically states in the narrative that she married Alan because he was different from the volatile men she dated before. He wasn't flashy or dangerous. He was safe.
She thought she could rest with him.
She believed, on a fundamental level, that he lacked the capacity to hurt her this way.
Right. So the betrayal here isn't merely the physical act of sex with another woman. It is the total annihilation of her foundational sense of safety in the world.
Her internal compass is broken.
Exactly. Her entire internal metric for judging human character, for assessing risk, has been proven fundamentally flawed. If the safe guy can do this, who on earth can you trust? The ground beneath her feet doesn't just shake, it disappears.
Meanwhile, we have to look at the contrast of how the trauma is being processed next door.
Back at the Taylor's house.
The next morning, Jack brings his daughter, Indy, a mug of hot chocolate.
Oh, this scene just breaks my heart.
It's a beautiful, tragic, nostalgic comfort from her childhood. It's something Angie used to make them to celebrate the weekend. And here is Jack, the profoundly wronged party, the man whose wife just decimated his life, taking the time to comfort the daughter who pulled the pin on the grenade.
It's an incredible moment of a parent's executive function overriding their personal trauma.
Jack is still steering the submarine.
He really is. But Indy's reaction is what really stuck with me, because she doesn't feel victorious. She had plotted this reveal. She wanted vengeance against her mother.
She wanted to be the hero of her own story.
Right. She expected to feel a sense of euphoria, a righteous cinematic justice. But sitting there with that hot chocolate, the desire for retribution completely evaporates, and she is left with sheer, unadulterated terror.
This is a perfect illustration of adolescent neurobiology.
Because her brain isn't fully formed.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and fully grasping consequences, is famously underdeveloped in a 13-year-old.
So she couldn't see the big picture.
Indy was operating almost entirely out of her amygdala, the emotional center. She had the intellectual capacity to uncover the secret and execute the reveal, but she lacked the neurological hardware to anticipate the emotional fallout.
She thought she was just firing a sniper rifle at her mother, but she actually set off a dirty bomb in a closed room.
That is a brilliant analogy. She didn't realize that the emotional shrapnel wouldn't just hit Angie and Alan. It would hit her, her siblings, her father, and the children next door.
Everyone becomes collateral damage.
She is terrified because she has suddenly realized that the adult world she thought she was clever enough to manipulate is far more interconnected, complex, and fragile than her adolescent brain could comprehend.
And that realization of extreme fragility leads us right into the next few days, where that fragility settles over the Brennan house like a suffocating fog.
Just an unbearable tension.
This brings us to the anatomy of a shattered illusion. For those first few days, Sophie is operating on pure mechanical autopilot.
She's numb.
Completely. You know that horrible phenomenon when you wake up after a trauma, and for 3 blissful seconds, your brain has amnesia?
Oh, that's the worst part of the day.
You think everything is normal, and then the memory crashes down on you, and the cortisol spikes so hard you feel physically sick.
Yes, it's the psychological equivalent of blunt force trauma. The profound numbness Sophie experiences is actually highly adaptive, though.
Really? How so?
Her nervous system is completely overwhelmed by the influx of stress hormones, so it essentially engages a circuit breaker. It shuts down the emotional receptors so she can maintain the baseline physical functions necessary to keep her children alive.
So she doesn't just collapse entirely. Well, she becomes a ghost in her own home. She's hiding out like a hermit, utterly terrified of leaving the house in case she bumps into Angie. She forces Alan to do the school run to take the kids to the park.
That's like a bunker.
It's this bizarre, tense dynamic where they are living together like hostages in a bunker. They barely speak. Alan is just waiting for her to make a move, to give a verdict. And Sophie is waiting for her own anger to arrive. She keeps thinking, why am I not raging? Why am I just numb?
That delayed onset of anger is incredibly common in complex trauma. Anger requires energy. It is an activating emotion.
It takes fuel to burn.
Right. When the body is in a state of profound shock and energy conservation, it suppresses anger. It's only when the nervous system begins to feel a tiny fraction of stability that the amygdala feels safe enough to release that suppressed rage.
And when that breaking point finally hits a few days in, it is spectacular.
It really is an explosion.
The kids are back at school, she's alone in the house, and her brain finally processes the specific identity of the mistress. It wasn't just anyone, it was Angie.
The curated neighbor.
The humiliation of it being her glamorous, curated neighbor. The anger finally breaches the dam. She starts pummeling a pillow. She's screaming, she's crying until her throat is raw. And then she looks at a family photo on the wall, a photo from a holiday in Greece that Angie actually took.
The visual trigger of the photograph is the catalyst.
Yeah.
It forces her to recognize that her past wasn't just ruined in the present, It was retroactively corrupted.
The sheer violation of that memory pushes her over the edge. She picks up Alan's favorite mug. It's one of those incredibly cheesy, tragic domestic props. It literally says, "World's best husband."
Oh, the irony.
And she hurls it across the kitchen, smashing it to absolute pieces against the wall.
The psychology of iconoclasm is at play here.
Iconoclasm, like breaking religious icons.
Exactly. When a regime falls, the citizens tear down the statues of the dictator. Sophie smashing that mug is a micro version of that historical impulse.
Tearing down the monument to her marriage.
She is violently physically rejecting the false narrative she has lived for the past decade. The world's best husband is a lie. The happy family photo taken by the mistress is a lie. By breaking the physical artifacts of her false reality, she is externalizing her internal fragmentation.
But I want to pause on the timing here, because right in the middle of this debris, right as she's staring at the shattered ceramic, the doorbell rings.
The tension in this moment is unbearable.
Oh, she freezes. Her heart rate must be through the roof. She thinks it's Angie coming to apologize. She steels herself, opens the door, and it's not Angie, it's Indy.
The teenager.
The teenager who blew up their lives is standing on her porch.
This interaction is absolutely pivotal for Sophie's cognitive reconstruction. Because Indy doesn't just come to apologize for the New Year's Eve scene. She brings new data that completely recontextualizes Sophie's understanding of her environment.
What does she tell her?
Indy reveals that Jack has moved out. But more importantly, she drops the absolute bombshell that her parents have been having serious, deeply toxic marital problems for years.
Wait, years?
Years. She mentions that Jack had actually moved out previously, long before this affair with Alan ever happened.
Which just floors Sophie. I mean, we have to deeply analyze this myth of the perfect couple. Sophie always viewed the Taylors as this glossy magazine cover for a successful marriage.
The aspirational neighbors.
Right. They were attractive, vivacious, financially successful, publicly affectionate. Sophie used to sit with Angie, drinking wine, pouring her deepest insecurities out, and Angie never breathed a single word about trouble in paradise.
If we look at this through the lens of sociologist Irving Goffman's theory of impression management, we see the classic division of front stage and backstage behavior.
Front stage and backstage.
Yeah. Suburban environments, especially affluent ones, create highly pressurized front stages. You are constantly observed by your neighbors. Angie was a master of impression management.
She was putting on a show.
She curated a flawless front stage performance of the perfect marriage to mask a deeply dysfunctional backstage reality.
And the proximity is what makes it so deceptive. The fact that they shared a garden gate created the illusion of deep intimacy. Sophie thought that physical closeness equated to emotional transparency.
But it was just geography.
She is standing on her porch realizing that she didn't just misjudge the character of her own husband, she completely misjudged the fundamental daily reality of the people living 20 feet away from her. The Taylors were a beautifully painted facade over a foundation infested with termites.
Exactly, and that realization forces Sophie to question her own perception of reality entirely. If she could be so wrong about the people she saw every single day, what else is she blind to?
Which brings us to the architect of that facade, Angie. What happens when the person curating that perfect image is suddenly forced to live in the wreckage of it?
It's not pretty.
The next morning, Angie has to do the school run, and the text describes it as utter, agonizing humiliation. She's terrified of running into Sophie, terrified of the playground gossip. She is suddenly a social pariah.
The fall from grace.
She actually spots Alan from a distance across the playground, and they just share this silent, pathetic nod. Two co-conspirators who suddenly realize they have completely destroyed the very lives they were trying to escape from.
The physiological toll of social ostracization is immense.
Like, it actually hurts.
Oh, absolutely. Evolutionary biology tells us that being cast out of the tribe was essentially a death sentence for early humans. Our brains process social rejection using the same neural pathways as physical pain. It's called social pain overlap theory.
So her brain thinks she's physically injured.
Angie isn't just feeling embarrassed. Her brain is registering the loss of her social standing as a severe physical injury. She's experiencing the terrifying freefall of losing her curated identity.
She hits absolute rock bottom. The imagery the author provides is striking. She's sitting on the cold tiles of her bathroom floor, retching. It's 9:30 in the morning, and she is genuinely contemplating pouring herself a massive gin.
Seeking any kind of numbness.
She's staring at this crystal fruit bowl she got as a wedding present, remembering when she first moved into the house, full of hope for a fresh start. And now she's calling HR to beg for a sabbatical. She's frantically looking up counselors. Her entire perfectly managed, tightly controlled life has unraveled in a matter of hours.
But what we really need to unpack is the why.
Why she did it?
Why did a woman so obsessed with control and image blow up her own life? When she finally confesses her true motivations to Jack and Indy, she reveals the deep-seated paranoia that drove her.
The paranoia. Let's talk about that.
She cheated on Alan because she had convinced herself, entirely without proof, that Jack was having an affair. She tells Indy she got a persistent, invasive idea in her head and simply couldn't shake it.
Wait, I need to make sure I understand this completely. She cheated on her husband as a preemptive strike because she imagined he was cheating on her.
Precisely.
That is insane.
In psychoanalytic terms, this is a devastating mix of projective identification and preemptive abandonment. Angie was under immense, self-imposed pressure to be the perfect working mother and wife.
So the anxiety just ate her alive.
The anxiety of potentially losing that perfect life, of being the victim of infidelity, became intolerable. To regain a twisted locus of control, she took a reckless, destructive action. By having an affair herself, she transformed from the potential passive victim into the active betrayer.
She was trying to manage the anticipated trauma by causing it herself.
It's a tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy.
And it's brought on by a chronic, toxic lack of communication. Jack even says to her during this confrontation, "Why do you have to bottle everything up? I've never cheated on you. That was you."
It highlights the extreme danger of treating our internal anxieties as objective facts. Angie operated on a delusion, and in doing so, became the exact villain she was terrified Jack was going to be.
So she's hit rock bottom. She realizes she's the sole architect of her own destruction, and she decides she has to face the music. She has to face Sophie.
The inevitable confrontation.
And the scene where this happens, the kitchen showdown, is written with such phenomenal spatial tension. It's pouring rain outside. Angie braves the weather, and she uses the guarding gate, which, by the way, I find incredibly audacious.
It's extremely presumptuous.
She used the garden gate like they're still mates. She steps into Sophie's kitchen, dripping wet.
Look at how Sophie utilizes physical boundaries in this scene, though. The kitchen is traditionally the heart of domestic warmth and hospitality.
But not today.
Not today. Sophie's reception is absolutely glacial. She doesn't offer a towel to dry off. She doesn't offer a seat. She just leans against the kitchen counter with her arms tightly crossed, literally and physically blocking Angie out, acting as an impenetrable human wall.
Angie starts her apology tour. She says what she did was unforgivable. She cries. She says she hates herself. But Sophie is not buying a single word of it.
Sophie sees right through it.
Sophie looks her dead in the eye and brands her a narcissist. She says, "You're not capable of hating yourself, Angie. The only person you care about is you."
Sophie zeroes in on the exact psychological mechanism that allowed Angie to betray her.
The narcissism.
She correctly identifies that Angie's actions had absolutely nothing to do with genuine love or even lust for Alan. They were about Angie needing narcissistic supply.
Explain that narcissistic supply.
She needed to feel desired. She needed to fill a cavernous void of insecurity within herself, and she used Alan as an instrument to do that, completely disregarding the collateral damage to her best friend.
And I want to stop you there and challenge this diagnosis.
Okay, let's hear the challenge.
Is Angie truly a clinical narcissist, or is Sophie just using that word as a weapon because she's hurting? I push back on the idea that Angie is completely devoid of empathy. Isn't it possible that Angie is just deeply emotionally dysregulated and panicked? She's clearly suffering on that bathroom floor.
That's a very fair challenge. The colloquial use of narcissist often flattens complex psychological distress.
Yeah.
Angie might not meet the clinical criteria for narcissistic personality disorder.
Right, she might just be a mess.
But her behavior in the affair was undeniably narcissistic in its function. Her suffering on the bathroom floor is real, but we have to ask, is she suffering because she hurt Sophie, or is she suffering because she got caught and lost her comfortable life?
Oh, that's a sharp distinction.
When people with high narcissistic traits apologize, the subtext is often, "I am in pain because you are angry at me. Please stop being angry so I can feel better," rather than, "I am in pain because I caused you pain."
That distinction is chilling. And Sophie seems to sense exactly that because she immediately delivers the cruelest detail, the thing that clearly hurts her the most. She brings up the pregnancy scare we talked about earlier.
The nice twist.
She says, "You let me comfort you. You knew I wanted a baby, and you let me comfort you knowing that baby could be my husband's." That is the ultimate knife twist. It exposes the sheer Machiavellianism required to maintain the lie.
And notice how Angie pivots when she realizes that this intellectualized apology isn't going to grant her absolution.
What does she do?
When Sophie refuses to forgive her, Angie issues this bizarre, almost desperate ultimatum. She asks if the kids can still play together.
It's insane. Like, can our kids still have play dates?
It is an attempt to salvage the social structure. If the kids can still play, then the damage isn't total. She is still trying to manage the optics of the situation.
And Sophie shuts it down instantly, cold as absolute ice. Get the F out of my kitchen.
A definitive end.
It is incredibly satisfying to read, but also profoundly sad. It's the definitive death of a decade-long friendship.
But Angie cannot just walk away. Before she steps back out into the rain, she throws one final, incredibly manipulative lifeline.
Not for herself, though.
No, for Alan. She turns back and says, I know we'll never be friends again, but for what it's worth, I think Alan deserves your forgiveness.
Which is none of her business. Sophie even yells that at her.
It's completely out of line.
But it's a brilliant tactical move by the author because that sentence just hangs in the humid air of the kitchen. The mistress on her way out the door forever, telling a wife that the husband is worth saving.
It changes the focus entirely.
It's this messy, complicated parting shot that forces Sophie to stop focusing her rage on Angie and turn her attention to the rubble of her marriage to decide what, if anything, is worth digging out.
And the concept of digging things out of the rubble serves as the central metaphor for the entire second half of this narrative. Because the story doesn't stay in that rainy kitchen, we experience a massive temporal shift.
A huge jump.
We jump forward 10 entire years.
10 years later, we leave the claustrophobia of the suburban kitchen and we are instantly dropped into the vibrant, chaotic, intellectual energy of Oxford University.
A completely different world.
We are introduced to Katie Brennan's Sophie and Alan's daughter, who is just a little girl drawing rainbows on the night of the New Year's Eve party. She is now a fresher, waiting in a massive, noisy line in a sports hall for student vaccinations.
What is incredibly fascinating here, from a thematic and psychological standpoint, is the poetic irony of Katie's chosen field of study.
She's studying archaeology.
Right. Think about what archaeology is. It is the meticulous science of brushing away layers of accumulated dirt to uncover the hidden, often uncomfortable truths of the past.
Digging up the ruins.
It is the study of ruins. And yet, she's completely unaware that the foundation of her own life is built on top of a massive, buried ruin that her parents meticulously covered over.
The irony is brilliant, because as far as Katie knows, she has this pristine, blot-free memory of her childhood. She remembers that her family abruptly moved to Cambridge when she was 8, but she views it as a positive adventure.
A fresh start.
Her parents are super supportive. They have what appears to be the deeply loving marriage. She is the golden child heading off to the Ivy League equivalent. And she goes for coffee with a new friend, Freya. And while they're sitting there chatting about modules and dorms, she realizes this incredibly handsome boy a few tables over is just staring at her.
It's the classic romantic meet-cute setup, but the audience knows it carries a catastrophic payload of trauma.
He comes over, he asks if they know each other, they do that awkward, polite British dance of trying to place the face, listing off secondary schools and hometowns. And suddenly, the boy gets it.
The light bulb goes on.
His face lights up. Katie Brennan, he says. And he introduces himself. It's Freddie. Freddie Taylor, the little boy from next door, the son of Jack and Angie.
The collision of these two worlds after a decade of highly curated silence is breathtaking.
It's like watching a car crash in slow motion.
And because Freddie grew up in a completely different reality than Katie, he operates under the entirely reasonable assumption that Katie knows exactly why their family stopped speaking. So he casually, cheerfully drops the bomb into the conversation.
He literally says, oh, my parents have been divorced for years. After you know what, are your folks still together? And Katie just gives him this blank, polite stare. She has absolutely no idea what he's talking about.
And Freddie, to his credit, possesses high emotional intelligence. He sees the utter blank confusion on her face.
He realizes what he's done.
He realizes in a fraction of a second that he has just accidentally stepped on a landmine that has been dormant for 10 years. He recognizes that her parents hid the truth, and he completely panics.
He invents a terrible excuse about being late for football practice and literally bolts out of the coffee shop,
leaving Katie sitting there with her head absolutely spinning. Because his words act as a catalyst. Suddenly, these fragmented, suppressed memories start pushing through the surface of her consciousness.
like the archaeology she's studying.
Exactly. She remembers the treehouse they used to play in. She remembers the gate between their gardens, the family scooting to primary school together. She realizes that her parents completely excised the Taylor family from their history, creating a giant black hole in her personal narrative.
So what does she do? She immediately walks out of the cafe and calls her dad.
And this phone call is deeply revealing regarding Alan's psychological state 10 years later. Because Alan, the conflict-avoidant, safe guy who usually placates everyone, has a completely out-of-character reaction.
It's super weird.
When Katie casually mentions bumping into Freddie Taylor, there's dead silence on the line. And then he says, in a harsh, panicked tone Katie has never heard him use, "Stay away from that boy. His whole family is bad news."
It's so bizarre. It's like a line out of a mafia movie. He practically forbids his adult daughter from speaking to an old playmate.
If we examine this through the lens of developmental psychology and family systems theory, this is a fascinating study in the extreme fragility of curated childhoods.
Curated childhoods.
Alan and Sophie made a conscious, incredibly difficult, and ethically complex decision 10 years ago to completely insulate their children from their trauma. From a purely outcome-based perspective, they succeeded.
Katie grew up happy.
She grew up feeling entirely secure, loved, and happy. But the inherent danger of a curated reality is that it is structurally dependent on a massive lie of omission.
And the moment that lie is exposed, the child doesn't just feel confused about that one specific event. They feel that their entire foundational reality is counterfeit.
Exactly. It relates to betrayal trauma theory, developed by psychologist Jennifer Freyd. While usually applied to abuse, the core tenet applies here. When the people you depend on for survival and reality testing deceive you, it fundamentally damages your ability to trust your own perception of the world.
You can't even trust your own memories.
Alan's panic on the phone isn't just about Freddie being a bad influence. It's the existential terror of realizing the dam he and Sophie built 10 years ago has just broken, and the floodwaters of truth are rushing toward his daughter's pristine reality.
Which forces Sophie's hand. She realizes the secret is out, and she races down to Oxford the very next morning. They meet for coffee, and Sophie finally, after a decade of silence, lays out the raw, unvarnished truth to her daughter.
The whole story.
She tells her everything. Yes, your dad had an affair. Yes, it was with our absolute best friend and neighbor, Angie Taylor.
Imagine the violent cognitive dissonance for Katie in that exact moment. The brain has to retroactively rewrite thousands of memories.
Everything shifts.
Suddenly, the smell of Angie's exotic perfume in their house makes sense. The abrupt, unexplained move to Cambridge makes sense. The sudden disappearance of her childhood best friends makes sense. The narrative of her life is being actively rewritten in real time by her own mother.
But the part that really throws Katie, and frankly, throws me as a reader, is the choice Sophie made.
The choice to stay.
Sophie explains that initially she stayed with Alan entirely for the kids. She didn't want to break up the family unit. She didn't want to lose her home. But then she says something profound and highly controversial.
That it wasn't just for the kids anymore.
She says that over time, the dynamic evolved. They moved to Cambridge to escape the environmental triggers. They put in relentless, grueling work in therapy, and they actually rebuilt the trust. Sophie looks Katie dead in the eye and insists that they have had a genuinely, authentically happy marriage for the last 10 years.
This is the absolute crux of the emotional and moral complexity of the entire narrative.
It's the big question.
Sophie is presenting a reality that heavily challenges our modern, often binary, culturally enforced view of infidelity. In our culture, we tend to view affairs as the definitive, unforgivable end of a story, a moral absolute.
Like once a cheater, always a cheater.
Right. But Sophie argues that real life isn't a fairy tale with clearly defined villains and heroes. Human beings are deeply flawed and capable of immense contradiction. She faced a brutal calculus. Does she let one massive, agonizing indiscretion destroy a decade of shared history in the home they built? Or does she attempt the excruciating, unglamorous work of forgiveness?
I have to ask you, and I think Katie is wrestling with this exact same question sitting across the table from her mom.
Yeah.
Is Sophie incredibly strong for doing the hard work of rebuilding, or is she incredibly foolish for staying with a man who betrayed her so profoundly?
It's a tough question.
Can you ever truly fundamentally trust someone again after they sleep with your best friend? Isn't the foundation permanently cracked?
It is the ultimate subjective question. Psychologically speaking, trust can be rebuilt, but it requires a second-order change, a complete transformation of the relationship's rules and boundaries.
So you can't just go back to normal.
No, normal is dead. For Sophie, the answer was yes, it could be rebuilt, but it required a drastic environmental change moving to Cambridge and a mutual commitment to absolute, painful transparency. She chose the brutally difficult path of reconstruction through proximity. She stayed in the burning building and helped put out the fire.
But what makes this narrative so illuminating is comparing the Brennan's path to the Taylor's path.
The contrast is amazing.
Right. Because after Katie processes this heavy confession with her mom, she ends up meeting Freddie at a pub later that week, and she asks him about his family, about what happened to the Taylors after the bomb went off on New Year's Eve. And Freddie reveals that his parents took a completely different route.
They divorced.
They divorced almost immediately. Jack moved out. But it wasn't this bitter, lifelong War of the Roses scenario. Freddie describes it as a very modern divorce.
The contrast is sociologically fascinating. The good divorce hypothesis suggests that the dissolution of a marriage doesn't have to result in the dissolution of the family structure, provided the parents can effectively co-parent without hostility.
And Jack and Angie somehow pulled that off.
They did. Jack remarried an ex-model, and Angie actually attended the wedding. Freddie says they are genuinely better friends now than they ever were as spouses. They amicably co-parented, and all four of their children grew up to be wildly successful. Indy is a model, Benji is a working actor for the BBC, Ellie works in conservation in New Zealand, and Freddie is at Oxford studying medicine.
Dr. Taylor, as he smugly insists on being called. The contrast is just mind-blowing. You have two families that experience the exact same catastrophic trauma at the exact same moment in time.
If we synthesize this, we see two completely diverging models of how human beings heal from absolute devastation. The Brennans chose reconstruction.
Rebuilding from the ashes.
They stayed in the fire, moved away from the geographic trigger, and forged a new, stronger bond by absorbing the trauma into the fabric of their marriage. The Taylors chose deconstruction.
Tearing it down.
They recognized the foundational rot of their marriage, dismantled the structure entirely, and built separate, healthier lives that allowed them to interact without the toxic pressure of romantic expectation. Neither path is objectively wrong or right, but they created vastly different psychological realities for their children.
Exactly. Katie's reality was built on a fiercely protected secret, a pristine bubble maintained by her parents' silence. Freddie's reality was built on transparent, if messy, truth. And you see that exact dynamic play out perfectly between them in the pub.
Oh, the pub scene is great.
They are sitting there over a white wine spritzer and a pint. Freddie has this incredibly easy, pragmatic confidence. He's had 10 years to digest his parents' deep flaws. He knows humans are messy. Katie, on the other hand, is reeling, deeply self-conscious, and feeling like her entire life is a beautifully constructed lie.
But listen to the advice Freddie gives her. It is remarkably mature and grounded in Stoic philosophy. He listens to her angst, her justified anger at her parents' deception, and he completely reframes the narrative for her.
He absolutely does. He looks at her and says, look at the objective facts of your life. You've had a remarkably happy upbringing. Your parents absolutely adore you. They clearly adore each other now. You are sitting at one of the best universities in the world, about to start an amazing life.
And then he delivers the thesis.
And then he delivers the ultimate pragmatic thesis for her to live by. F the drama and move on.
He is offering her psychological permission to accept the validity of her own happiness.
To not throw away the good stuff.
He is arguing that the existence of the secret doesn't negate the genuine love she experienced. The 10 years of peace her parents manufactured wasn't a malicious, manipulative lie designed to hurt her. It was a protective shield that allowed her brain to develop without the toxic stress of their trauma. He is urging her to take ownership of her present narrative rather than being swallowed by their past.
It's such a compelling, liberating argument. And it leads to this fantastic final encounter between them that beautifully ties up the themes of this deep dive. It's a few weeks later. Katie has just handed in her first big university paper.
A classic student milestone.
She goes to the local pub with her friends to celebrate. She goes to the bar to get a round of drinks, and she spots Freddie. But he's standing there chatting and laughing intimately with a glossy-haired girl who has her hand resting on his arm. And Katie feels this immediate, sharp, undeniable pang of jealousy. She completely deflates.
The past has finally caught up to her, but now it is hopelessly entangled with very present, very real romantic tension.
She gets her drinks, tries to scurry away without being seen, but Freddie spots her. He comes over, helps her carry the heavy tray to her table, and they have this brilliant, prickly exchange. Katie tries to play it cool, puts up her armor, and makes a snarky comment about him having fun with his girlfriend.
Freddie doesn't miss a beat.
And Freddie just gives her this smug, knowing smile. He sees right through her jealousy, right through the defense mechanism. He clarifies that the girl is his flatmate's girlfriend, not his.
And then he lays his cards on the table with that same easy, unburdened confidence.
He acknowledges the weirdness.
He acknowledges the extreme awkwardness of their situation, the incredibly messy, shared history of their parents' infidelity. But he entirely refuses to let it dictate their future. He refuses to inherit the trauma.
He looks at her right in the middle of this crowded pub and openly admits he likes hanging out with her. He says, "I like you, Brennan," and then he walks away, leaving her with the ultimate challenge. The ball is in your court.
It is such a phenomenal place to leave their story.
Because it forces Katie to decide if she is going to let the sins of her parents define the boundaries of her life, or if she's going to step out of the ruins of their history and write her own chapter.
It's a deeply powerful narrative about agency and the malleability of the human spirit. But if we pull back and look at the entirety of what we've discussed today, from the explosive, chaotic New Year's Eve toast to the chillingly silent walk in the freezing rain, from the shattered world's best husband mug to the quiet, tension-filled coffee shop in Oxford, it leaves us with a profound philosophical dilemma about the very nature of truth, memory, and protection.
It really does. I want you to think about your own life for a second. Think about your own memories of childhood, the family vacations you took, the quiet dinners around the table, the feeling of absolute, unquestionable security in your house.
Those foundational memories.
If you found out today, right now, as you're listening to this, that the happiest, most secure moments of your youth were actually built on top of a massive hidden trauma that your parents meticulously concealed to protect you, would it invalidate that happiness?
Would it make it all a lie?
Does a lie that successfully creates a decade of genuine peace and stability become its own kind of truth? Or is a curated reality always just waiting for the right person to accidentally knock it over? It makes you stare into your own past, doesn't it? Wondering what structural secrets might be quietly holding up your own perfect memories. You are immediately plunged into this totally visceral, completely destabilizing reality of an Oxford University morning.
Right into the deep end.
Exactly. We are thrown straight into the room with Katie Brennan. And, to really grasp the friction of this opening, you have to understand the architecture of who Katie is at her core.
Which is, very structured.
Highly structured. This is a young woman whose entire existence is held together by structural integrity. She operates on systems,
Yeah, the color-coded timetables.
Right. Her dorm room wall is just covered in them. She is a militant daily to-do list person. And for someone like Katie, extreme organization isn't just like a cute personality quirk.
No, not at all.
It functions as a psychological shield against the unpredictable chaos of the outside world.
Right.
And in this exact moment, all of that carefully curated control, that entire fortress of predictability, has been spectacularly derailed by one single variable.
Freddie Taylor.
Freddie Taylor.
The physical reality of the scene is placed in direct, almost violent opposition to her established coping mechanisms. I mean, the source material provides this incredibly grounding, mundane detail to really highlight the severity of the disruption.
It's 8:45 a.m.
Exactly. It's 8:45 a.m. She is going to be late for a lecture. For Katie Brennan, being late is not just a minor inconvenience, right?
It's a crisis.
It represents a fundamental breakdown of her operational protocol. She has, quite literally, never been late for anything in her life.
Wow.
Yet she is paralyzed.
Yeah.
And why? Because Freddie is standing there brushing his teeth, wearing nothing but his boxers.
Right.
And her stomach executes this biological involuntary flip. It is a somatic response that completely bypasses her prefrontal cortex.
It's like her body is taking over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Her logical, schedule-driven brain is being overridden by an autonomous physical reaction to his mere presence in her space.
And that biological override, it terrifies her, but she also acknowledges it with this surprising level of clarity. I mean, she realizes in that split second that Freddie has, piece by piece, dismantled every protective emotional barrier she spent her entire life building.
She's totally exposed.
He is entirely helpless against him. And what completely reshapes the narrative here is how she reframes her entire romantic history while just like watching him brush his teeth.
Right, the learner plates.
Yes. She categorizes all her past teenage crushes, all those brief, structured university relationships, as nothing more than learner plates. They were practice runs. simulations.
Well, this is real.
This visceral lack of control with Freddie is the real thing, but, that realization carries a crushing gravitational weight.
Because of the secret.
Right. They have been inseparable for 6 weeks, operating inside this beautiful, isolated Oxford bubble where the external world has just ceased to exist.
Yeah.
But beneath that euphoria, there's this radioactive isotope vibrating under the floorboards of their relationship.
And the isolation of that Oxford bubble is a necessary illusion, because outside of it, their families share a deeply destructive, catastrophic history.
It's the elephant in the room.
A massive elephant. The text really forces us to examine the psychological toll of carrying a secret that contradicts your foundational identity. I mean, they are experiencing the euphoric, dopamine-flooded stage of new love.
The honeymoon phase.
Right. But they are hiding it from the very people who define their respective realities. Katie's identity is inextricably bound to being a good, honest daughter.
Specifically to her mother.
Yes, to her mother, who was the primary victim of the historical trauma between their two families.
Which makes Katie's internal benchmark for secrecy so incredibly revealing. I mean, up until Freddie, she notes that the absolute biggest secret she had ever kept from her mother was stealing a mascara from Boots.
A drugstore mascara.
Let's just look at the mechanics of that. She felt so utterly wretched, so physically sick with guilt over a plastic tube of drugstore mascara that she actually snuck back into the shop to return it.
That is her baseline threshold for moral failure.
Exactly. Now she is sleeping with the son of the woman who destroyed her parents' marriage. The disparity between those two secrets is astronomical.
It's hard to even quantify.
It really is. Think about the ways you, as a listener, might shrink yourself or bend your own rules to protect a fragile family dynamic. I mean, have you ever held a secret so heavy, so loaded with collateral damage, that it physically alters the atmospheric pressure of a room the second a phone rings?
Because that is the physiological reality of their daily lives.
Yeah.
The manifestation of that pressure is vividly detailed in the source material. I mean, they can be completely entangled, entirely content in their bubble, but the instant a phone vibrates and a family member's name flashes on the screen,
Everything changes.
their physical posture changes immediately. They tuck the phone under a pillow. The mood sours instantly. The thrill of the illicit romance is constantly being corroded by dread.
Right.
We are observing the physical toll of severe cognitive dissonance here. Katie holds two conflicting truths.
She loves Freddie.
She is hopelessly in love with Freddie, yes, and loving Freddie is a fundamental betrayal of her family's survival narrative. Maintaining those two opposing realities requires an immense output of psychological energy.
It's exhausting.
It creates an internal friction that her nervous system simply does not have the bandwidth to sustain indefinitely.
And that friction inevitably combusts. It leads directly to their first genuine confrontation.
In the pub.
Right. They are sitting in a pub after lectures, surrounded by the normal noise of university life, pints in hand, and the tension finally snaps over the impending holidays. Katie asks this procedural question. Are we going to tell our parents?
And Freddie's reaction is so casual.
Brutally, almost comically laid back. He tells her he doesn't see why they should, that it isn't any of their business.
Yeah.
And Katie's reaction is immediate spiraling anxiety. She interprets his nonchalance as a personal rejection. She actually asks him, "Are you ashamed of me?"
The disparity in their reactions here is just a masterclass in how childhood environment dictates adult emotional blueprints. I mean, you have two individuals reacting to the exact same external stressor using completely divergent psychological frameworks.
Totally different worlds.
Katie is tightly wound, constantly scanning for threats, and deeply protective of her family's equilibrium. Why? Because she views her family unit as a shattered vase that has been painstakingly glued back together.
Because of the affair.
Right. Her parents survived a massive public trauma. So in Katie's mind, their peace is highly delicate, and she feels a profound, almost parental duty to protect it.
So keeping a secret feels like she's undoing the glue.
Exactly. Therefore, keeping a secret of this magnitude feels like she is actively eroding the glue holding her family together.
I understand Katie's perspective completely, but, I struggle to see Freddie's response as just simple nonchalance. I mean, is he really that oblivious, or is his laid-back attitude its own kind of defense mechanism?
Oh, it is absolutely a defense mechanism born from an entirely different environment. Freddie originates from a massive, loud, chaotic, blended family structure.
Right.
He has half-siblings, step-parents, and this constantly revolving door of domestic trauma. To Freddie, A family is not a fragile, delicate vase to be protected.
It's a zoo.
A family is a noisy, intrusive organism that must be managed. When he refers to his relatives as nosy arseholes, he isn't being malicious.
It's just a boundary.
He is stating a required boundary for his own psychological survival within that chaotic unit. He views keeping the relationship a secret, not as betrayal, but as an essential firewall.
He just wants to protect what they have.
He's trying to protect the sanctity of what he has with Katie from being consumed by his family's insatiable appetite for drama.
Yeah.
Katie views the secret as an erosion of her integrity. Freddie views the secret as the very thing keeping them safe.
Right. So they aren't just arguing about a timeline for a conversation, you know? They are arguing about the fundamental definition of what family is supposed to be. But Freddie does something remarkable here. He actually recalibrates. He stops defending his framework and observes hers.
He sees her panic.
He sees the physical toll the anxiety is taking on Katie. In that pub, he tells her he loves her, which, by the way, is the first time the words are spoken out loud. And he concedes.
A huge moment.
If she needs the structural integrity of the truth, they will detonate the bomb. They agree to go home for Christmas and face the devastation.
It's the music.
But Katie's terror surrounding this revelation highlights a profound truth about trauma. It makes us view information as a weapon. And to truly understand the explosive potential of this specific piece of information, we have to examine the psychology of the person who originally weaponized it over a decade ago.
Right, which brings us to Indy. And the narrative scope widens here with incredible precision, pulling us away from the damp claustrophobia of Oxford and dropping us onto a sun-drenched hotel balcony in the Canary Islands.
Such a stark contrast.
We are introduced to Indy, Freddie's older sister. And the juxtaposition of her current reality against the impending family crisis is vital. Indy is leaning against a balcony railing, smoking a cigarette, watching the sun sink into the ocean.
Right, she's on a shoot.
She's in the middle of shooting a commercial summer collection. She is debating the mundane logistics of whether to join the production crew downstairs for Patatas Bravas. The text paints this slightly glamorous, highly transient, and ultimately lonely reality of a working model.
Because she has structurally removed herself from the family chaos, she isn't just geographically distant. You know, she is emotionally insulated. She is actively planning to skip the family Christmas entirely to travel to Singapore and Thailand. She is building literal oceans between herself and her past. And then that isolation is pierced.
With a phone call.
Her phone rings. It's Fredo, her baby brother. He admits he has met someone and is terrified of the holiday fallout. And Indy's initial reaction is utterly dismissive, almost amused.
She thinks it's superficial.
Yeah, she assumes it's superficial drama, asking if he's shagging someone famous. But then Freddie drops the payload. He says the name. Katie Brennan.
And Indy's physiological reaction is immediate shock. The text notes she nearly drops the phone over the balcony. To decode the severity of that shock, we really must perform a deep forensic unpacking of Indy's adolescent psychology.
Let's do it.
Over a decade prior, Indy was a 13-year-old girl who stumbled upon the ultimate family taboo. She discovered her mother, Angie, was engaged in an affair with Katie's father, Alan.
Which is devastating for a kid.
Right, and the adolescent brain is heavily reliant on splitting. It's a defense mechanism that categorizes everything in absolute black and white terms of good versus evil.
There's no nuance at 13.
Exactly. Fueled by this binary rage, a 13-year-old Indy maliciously, publicly exposed the affair on New Year's Eve. Her localized intention was simply to punish her mother. But the systemic result was the complete, agonizing devastation of two entirely separate families.
Put yourself inside that specific psychological prison for a moment. I mean, most of us carry minor regrets from our teenage years, right? Things we said in anger, petty rebellions. But imagine your brain maturing.
Gaining that adult perspective.
Imagine developing adult cognitive empathy and suddenly possessing the emotional capacity to look backward and realize that the complexities of a failing marriage were light years beyond your 13-year-old comprehension.
Oh, definitely.
You realize that in a localized attempt to hurt your mother, you launched a missile that leveled the lives of innocent bystanders, including the little girl living next door. The sheer crushing volume of that guilt has to be paralyzing.
Absolutely paralyzing.
I mean, how do you construct a life when your foundational act was burning your own house down?
You construct a life built on deflection and avoidance, which is exactly what Indy did. The text masterfully explores the highly complex mother-daughter dynamic that emerged from the wreckage of that New Year's Eve.
It's so intense.
For years, Indy could not process her own culpability, so she exported it entirely onto her mother. She threw an immense, relentless barrage of anger and vitriol at Angie.
Right.
She weaponized her own independence, signing a modeling contract at the first opportunity simply to secure an escape velocity from her mother's presence.
I would assume the natural reaction from a parent in that scenario, especially one who is publicly humiliated by their own child, would be defensiveness. A demand for respect, or at least a counterattack regarding the child's cruelty. But Angie doesn't do that.
Angie's response defies conventional conflict resolution. It is a masterclass in the mechanics of parental absorption. Angie never retaliated, not a single time.
Wow.
When Indy aggressively demanded to abandon her education for modeling, Angie signed the legal permissions without a word of protest.
She just let her go.
She maintained a steady rhythm of texts and phone calls, deliberately stripped of any guilt-tripping language when Indy inevitably ignored them. And the most critical juncture occurred when Indy's adolescent hubris collapsed.
When she ran out of money.
When she lost her bookings and showed up entirely broken and bankrupt on her mother's doorstep, Angie did not gloat. She did not demand an apology. She simply opened her arms and welcomed her daughter back into the physical safety of the home.
So Angie essentially operated as a shock absorber for her daughter's trauma. She allowed Indy to hurl all of that unprocessed rage at her until the reserves were simply empty.
Exactly.
And the text explicitly notes that it was this relentless, unconditional empathy that finally broke through Indy's armor. It thawed the anger because, well, you cannot sustain a war against someone who refuses to return fire.
You just run out of ammo.
Right. They slowly, painstakingly repaired their bond. So, flash forward to that balcony in the Canary Islands. Indy hears that her beloved little brother is inextricably linked to the daughter of the family she destroyed. And her immediate question is telling. She asks Freddie if Katie's parents are still together.
And when Freddie confirms they are, the text describes a massive physical flood of relief washing over Indy.
That relief is the psychological recognition of karma. I mean, Indy explicitly thinks to herself that the universe has finally collected its debt. It is the end of her avoidance coping.
The bill comes due.
She looks down over the balcony, sees the crew laughing, eating their patatas, bravas, moving on without her, and she makes a profound active choice. She cancels the flights to Thailand.
She turns back.
She tells Freddie, "I'm not missing the showdown for love nor money." She is voluntarily marching back into the epicenter of the blast zone she created, specifically to act as a human shield for her brother.
It is a transition from guilt, which is passive and self-serving, to accountability, which is active and protective.
It is a phenomenal redemption arc. I mean, she is choosing the fire over the beach. And this decision operates as the structural bridge to the absolute emotional zenith of this deep dive. The tale of two Christmas dinners.
The contrast is just incredible here.
We are presented with two fiercely contrasting households, both entirely oblivious, preparing to absorb the exact same volatile piece of information. The execution of this contrast is brilliant. Let's begin with the collision of past and present at the Brennan house.
Okay, the Brennan house.
Katie returns from Oxford, and the atmospheric tension is suffocating. Her father, Alan, looks physically aged and deeply awkward. He can't even seamlessly hug his own daughter because the power dynamic of the family has been fundamentally altered by her independence.
Right.
Her mother, Sophie, is vibrating with nervous energy, overcompensating by generating this wall of mundane chatter to fill the agonizing silences. And Tom, the brother, is sprawled across the furniture, utilizing humor as a deflector field by mocking Freddie's childhood bedwetting.
Ah, yes. He calls him Fresh Pants Freddie.
Exactly.
And it is a portrait of a family desperately pantomiming normalcy. I mean, they are performing the roles of a happy family without possessing the underlying emotional infrastructure.
Yeah.
Katie is sitting amidst this performance, nursing a cup of tea, and she realizes the structure cannot hold.
So she forces the collapse.
She informs them she's seeing someone seriously, and she names Freddie Taylor. And the physiological reactions detailed in the text are so precise.
Sophie in the teacup.
Yes, Sophie meticulously, carefully places her teacup onto a saucer, her movements highly controlled, suggesting she is terrified her hands will betray her internal tremor. Alan's reaction is an immediate loss of color. The blood physically drains from his face.
But the silence is temporary, right? Alan rapidly transitions from shock into an absolute volcanic eruption. He demands with absolute authority that she sever the relationship immediately. The line he delivers is staggering in its cruelty. He says, 20,000 kids and you choose to go out with this one.
It's so defensive.
He attempts to architect a narrative where Katie is a reckless, selfish agent of chaos who has zero regard for the psychological safety of her mother. But, I struggle to view Alan purely as a protective husband here. Isn't this aggressive posturing actually a desperate, flailing attempt to regain narrative control?
Oh, it is entirely about narrative control, driven by the absolute mechanics of shame externalization. Let us break down the anatomy of Alan's fury. It is a textbook manifestation of projection and hypocrisy.
Explain that.
His anger has zero correlation to Freddie's actual character. Alan's psyche cannot safely process the sudden, violent resurrection of his own shame. He has spent 11 years convincing himself that his betrayal was an archived file, a buried chapter that no longer defined him.
And now Freddie is in his living room.
Well, Freddie's existence in his daughter's life is a walking, breathing monument to Alan's failure. When Katie attempts to reason with him, stating, "What happened in the past is not his fault and it's not mine either," she is holding up a psychological mirror.
Yeah.
She is demanding he acknowledge the origin of the trauma, and Alan's ego cannot survive that reflection. He snaps, "So it's all my fault, is it?"
Yeah.
That is the nucleus of his rage.
Right there.
His ego is collapsing, and to survive, he exports his intolerable shame, weaponizes it, and attaches it to the safest available targets: his daughter and her boyfriend. He isn't screaming at Katie, he is screaming at his own reflection.
And just as that volatility threatens to consume the room, we witness the astonishing emotional regulation of Sophie. This is where the true power dynamics of the Brennan household are revealed.
Sophie's reaction is incredible.
Alan is surging with this erratic, high-voltage guilt, and Sophie, the woman who is actually betrayed, the woman who possesses every moral right to bring the room down, simply acts as an emotional grounding wire.
Yeah.
She stands up and says 2 words, "Alan, enough." And the current is instantly killed. He is silenced. She absorbs the chaotic energy of the room and neutralizes it, rendering his panic completely powerless.
It is an assertion of supreme, hard-won autonomy. Sophie sits back down, physically takes Alan's hand to anchor him, and turns to her daughter. She explicitly states that the historical fallout is not Katie's burden to carry, nor is it Freddie's. She effectively uncouples the children from the sins of the parents.
The aftermath of that scene contains what might be the most profound insight in this entire deep dive.
The kitchen scene.
Yes. Later, Katie and Sophie are isolated in the kitchen. Katie is vibrating with residual anxiety, practically in tears, and she asks her mother a heartbreaking question. Will her dad ever forgive her for this?
And Sophie's response.
Sophie looks at her daughter, bypasses all the superficial drama, and delivers this line. It's not about forgiving you, love. It's about forgiving himself.
Wow.
Let that resonate. I mean, think about the conflicts in your own life. Think about the moment someone has directed intense, disproportionate anger at you. How often is that hostility just the mirrored reflection of their own internal shame?
A lot of the time, honestly.
Sophie possesses the emotional X-ray vision to look straight through Alan's aggressive bluster and see the fractured, guilty man desperately trying to hide behind it. And she makes a conscious, elevated choice to prioritize her daughter's psychosocial development over her own historical grievances. Your happiness is all I care about, she tells Katie.
And to achieve that level of emotional clarity requires years of brutal, unseen internal labor. Sophie has successfully metabolized her trauma. Now, to truly appreciate the spectrum of human coping mechanisms, we must contrast that heavy, suffocating atmosphere with the absolute circus occurring simultaneously at the Taylor residence.
The Taylor house is wild.
The environmental setup is wildly divergent. Instead of stilted tea, there are mountains of takeaway curry and flowing champagne. The space is crowded, loud, and chaotic.
A completely different vibe.
Jack, the patriarch, is present with his significantly younger second wife, a woman Angie still pettily and deliberately refers to as what's-her-face.
Which is so funny.
Benji, one of the brothers, has arrived with his profoundly disinterested new girlfriend, Bianca, who the family is collectively silently relieved is not the famous actress Bianca Friedman. It is a tableau of pure, unfiltered absurdity.
It is a pressure cooker of clashing personalities. You have 8 pairs of eyes darting around a crowded kitchen table. Jack is chewing his food with complete, oblivious contentment. Ellie is firing off sarcastic jabs. And Freddie, who looks like a petrified hostage, finally drops the name.
Katie Brennan.
Katie Brennan. The audio dynamics of the room shift instantly. The chaotic noise is sucked into a vacuum. The text vividly describes Angie completely freezing, her fork suspended midair, the color draining from her complexion.
The shock is palpable.
Jack's brain takes an extra second to process the data, and when it finally computes, he just drops a heavy, stunned "Christ." The tension is agonizing. Freddie is bracing for an explosion.
And this is precisely the tactical moment Indy returned for. She surveys the battlefield, she observes the shock, the paralyzed tension, and she makes a highly calculated decision to intentionally detonate the room.
With a joke.
She takes a breath, leans into the silence, and says, well, I, for one, can't wait for the wedding.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here. I struggle to view Indy as the strategic hero in this dining room scene. Isn't dropping a sarcastic joke about a wedding in the exact moment your mother is experiencing a trauma response just wildly narcissistic? I mean, it feels like she is hijacking the tension to make the moment about her own performance.
On a surface level, it appears deeply inappropriate, absolutely. But we have to analyze the neurology of humor within high-stress environments.
Okay.
Indy is not making it about herself. She is forcefully opening a neurological relief valve. When the human brain encounters two wildly conflicting realities that it cannot simultaneously process, in this case, the heavy, devastating reality of their past trauma colliding with the sheer farcical absurdity of their children dating, it experiences a cognitive short circuit.
The glitch.
Indy's joke is so deliberately, aggressively tone-deaf that it forces the brain to abandon its attempt to reconcile the two realities. It provides an escape hatch from the paralysis of trauma.
And the physiological reaction sweeps the room like a chain reaction. It starts small. Ellie lets out an involuntary muffled snort.
The seal is broken.
The sound breaks the seal. Benji, unable to contain the pressure, starts guffawing. Jack, who is utterly out of his depth and simply bemused by the chaos of his life, starts chuckling until it escalates into full-blown howling.
Yeah.
And then the camera pans to Angie, the woman whose life was ripped apart by this history. She looks up from her champagne glass, tears actively streaming down her face, and she chokes out, "Jesus Christ, Indy!" between massive, heaving sobs of laughter.
It is the biological expulsion of a decade-long psychological breath. They are not laughing because the affair wasn't agonizing. They are laughing because the present universe is so entirely beyond their jurisdiction.
I can't control it.
The absurdity of fate has orchestrated a scenario so mathematically improbable that their only healthy, functional response is absolute surrender. By engaging in collective laughter, they are verbally and physically acknowledging the madness of their shared existence. They are dropping their armor.
Freddie actually falls off his chair.
Right. Freddie is so overwhelmed by the release of tension that he literally laughs until he falls backward off his chair. The anxiety holding the family hostage is entirely shattered by the recognition of their own powerlessness.
It is a chaotic, beautiful, messy release. But, the narrative doesn't allow us to stay in that space of loud comedy. It executes a profound tonal pivot, moving us from the chaotic group dynamic into something incredibly solitary, intimate, and devastating.
The mechanics of grace.
This transition brings us to what functions as the philosophical core of this entire exploration, the mechanics of grace and the ultimate act of forgiveness.
And the setting for this convergence is critical. 11 years after she packed her life into boxes and fled the fallout of her husband's affair, Sophie voluntarily drives her car back to Pemberton Road.
A huge step.
The text provides a vital visual contrast to ground us in the passage of time. Sophie parks and observes her former home. It has been overwritten by new occupants. It features a contemporary blue door, modern white shutters, and a massive 4x4 parked in the driveway.
But there's a structural change, too.
The most significant detail is structural. The connecting garden gate between her old property and Angie's house has been removed. The new owners found it creepy.
That removed gate isn't just a landscaping choice. It's a massive psychological symbol. It represents the reestablishment of rigid boundaries after a period of destructive enmeshment.
The boundaries back up.
Her old house has been neutralized. It has moved on. But then she shifts her gaze to Angie's house next door, and it operates like a geographical ghost. It is largely unchanged, a frozen time capsule of the era before the explosion.
Yeah.
Sophie has initiated this encounter. She is on a diplomatic mission to clear the air, to ensure the toxicity of the past doesn't poison Katie and Freddie's future. But as she ascends those front steps, the somatic memory of betrayal hits her.
She feels it physically.
The nausea rises in her throat. She knocks, the door opens, and the text explicitly notes that Sophie almost gasps out loud. Because Angie doesn't look like the confident antagonist of her memories. Angie looks gaunt. She looks hollowed out and pale.
The initial phase of the reunion is agonizingly rigid. They are two women who previously shared a deeply permeable, intimate friendship, now reduced to sitting rigidly in a kitchen, attempting to politely navigate the logistical reality of their children dating.
So awkward.
They are speaking through layers of scar tissue. But Sophie, despite the 11-year chasm of betrayal, still possesses an instinctual baseline read on her former friend's physiology.
She knows her too well.
She registers the physical deterioration. She realizes something is catastrophically wrong beneath the surface. She abandons the polite script and presses Angie. The pressure cracks the facade, and Angie finally breaks.
Angie confesses that she has cancer. The prognosis is grim. She explicitly states it is not great. And then she reveals the detail that shifts the entire paradigm of the encounter. She hasn't told a single member of her sprawling, chaotic family.
Which is shocking for someone from that family.
She confesses that she simply cannot endure the psychological weight of watching their faces contort with grief. She has been navigating this sterile, terrifying landscape of oncology wards and chemotherapy sessions completely and utterly alone.
This revelation forces a profound philosophical crossroads, and it serves as the ultimate crucible for Sophie's character. I mean, how does the human ego respond when the specific individual who offered the most profound, agonizing devastation in your life is suddenly stripped of all power, vulnerable, and facing their own mortality?
The instinctual base human response is retaliation, or at the very least, passive satisfaction.
Schadenfreude.
Exactly, Schadenfreude. Which is exactly why this moment is so staggering. You brace yourself for Sophie to feel a flicker of cosmic vindication, the universe finally balancing the scales and punishing the architect of her pain. But that reaction never materializes.
Not at all.
Instead, Sophie's response is immediate, fierce, and fiercely protective. She bypasses the betrayal entirely. She looks at Angie, and with absolute authority, she says, "You need to tell Jack. You need to talk to him now. You send me your list of appointments, and I'll be there with you each time."
Angie's brain cannot compute this response.
No.
It violates her understanding of consequence. She looks at Sophie, completely baffled, and asks, "Why are you being so nice to me? I was such a bitch to you."
And Sophie delivers a line that perfectly encapsulates the paradox of forgiveness. She says, "You really were, but you're my bitch, and I'm not letting you go through this on your own."
Let us meticulously unpack the mechanics of that grace. It is not born from naivety or weakness. To understand how Sophie possesses the psychological architecture to offer that level of mercy, we have to recognize the unseen labor of the preceding 11 years.
The healing she did.
Sophie did the grueling, unglamorous work of repairing her own foundation. She and Alan waded through the agonizing process of rebuilding trust and reconstructing their marriage.
And because she did that work.
Because her marriage survived, because she actively chose to stay and managed to cultivate genuine happiness within that choice, her ego is no longer held hostage by the affair. She has uncoupled her identity from the trauma.
That makes sense.
Her secure attachment to her present reality grants her the immense emotional luxury of separating Angie the homewrecker, a static historical villain, from Angie, the terrified, deteriorating human being sitting in front of her.
She experiences a profound physical release after that conversation. She returns to her car and breaks down in tears. But she isn't just weeping for the ghosts of her own past. She's weeping for the terrifying reality of Angie's present.
Empathy.
Yes, empathy. And the most remarkable part is that her promise wasn't empty rhetoric. She follows through. The text details the subsequent months of treatment. For months, Sophie leaves her rebuilt life to sit inside a sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital cubicle while highly toxic chemicals are pumped into the veins of the woman who slept with her husband.
They watch terrible daytime television.
When the nausea and exhaustion render Angie too weak to speak, Sophie simply sits beside her and reads aloud. Angie is in awe of it. She views Sophie's presence as almost hallucinatory, describing her internally as a sparkly unicorn with a knight in shining armor on top.
It's almost surreal to her.
Angie even has this profound realization where she concludes that even if this is a meticulously executed long contact, even if Sophie is just waiting for the perfect moment of maximum vulnerability to stab her in the heart, it would still be a fair trade just to avoid facing the abyss alone.
What we are observing is the fascinating phenomenon where shared vulnerability completely overrides historical conflict. They're no longer tethered to each other by the domestic enmeshment of Pemberton Road, nor are they bound solely by the explosive trauma of the betrayal.
They are united by survival.
They are united by the terrifying, universal equalizer of human mortality. Angie's decision to hide her illness was rooted in a deep, unspoken belief that she deserved to suffer in isolation as a karmic penance for detonating her family all those years ago. She viewed her cancer as a consequence.
A punishment.
Sophie, by willingly entering that hospital room, effectively acts as a psychological pardon. She absolves Angie of that specific penance. She forcefully demonstrates to Angie that despite her monumental failures, she retains intrinsic human value and remains worthy of being accompanied through the dark.
That absolution provides Angie with the necessary psychological fortitude to finally break her silence. She tells Jack, she tells the children, she allows her chaotic, massive family to surround her and support her.
The healing begins.
It triggers a complete systemic cycle of healing for the entire Taylor network, and it is entirely catalyzed by Sophie's staggering capacity to extend grace where none was required. And that intricate web of healing propels us into the epilogue.
The time jump.
The narrative executes a 3-year time jump. We arrive at graduation day. The kids have definitively proven that their connection was not a fragile, adrenaline-fueled university phase. It was structural.
Okay.
Katie's preparing to put on her cap and gown.
The critical psychological detail in this epilogue is the depiction of their psychosocial development. Katie and Freddie have not bonded through trauma-induced codependency.
Right.
They are not clinging to one another as life rafts to survive their family's history. They possess secure attachment. Katie is preparing to travel to South America for months to work on a grueling archaeological project. Freddie is relocating to London to pursue a demanding master's degree in sports science.
They aren't afraid of distance.
They possess a profound trust in their foundation, allowing them to pursue independent trajectories without the paralyzing fear that physical distance will cause their relationship to collapse.
The manifestation of this healed foundation is vividly displayed during the merging of the two families at a crowded hotel bar after the ceremony. And what I appreciate about the text is that it refuses to paint a frictionless, utopian picture.
It's not a fairy tale.
It remains grounded in psychological realism. The interaction is not perfect. Alan is still visibly rigid, still battling his own deep-seated discomfort with the visual reality of the Taylors. But the critical evolution is that his love for Katie overrides his ego. He pushes through the paralyzing awkwardness. Jack, entirely devoid of malice, approaches Alan, extends his hand, and offers him a beer.
And Alan takes it.
Alan takes it. Indy, remaining a chaotic and unpredictable variable, casually saunters over and places a kiss on Alan's cheek, cheerfully addressing him as Mr. B.
Still pushing boundaries.
Always. The atmosphere is incredibly tense, but it is functional. It is civil. They are enduring the discomfort to honor the children.
The narrative then provides a moment of profound contrast to that tense diplomacy. We observe the morning after the graduation.
The drive home.
Sophie and Katie are in the car, embarking on the drive home. They pull over for a completely unglamorous, spontaneous McDonald's Quarter Pounder.
I love that detail.
The radio is turned up loud. They're singing along, dancing in their seats with ketchup on their fingers. It is a vital cinematic moment of pure, unburdened emotional release.
Katie is looking out the window, flooded with the realization that the oppressive weight of the past has been lifted. Her entire future is a blank, open expanse.
Yes.
But the true, absolute thematic closure occurs when they reach their destination. They pull onto Pemberton Road to attend a sprawling graduation party hosted at Angie's house. Sophie steps out of the car, and the visual direction is deeply significant.
Because of what she doesn't do.
Exactly. She doesn't gaze longingly at her old house. She doesn't search for ghosts. Instead, she observes the present reality of the property. She sees the new occupants, a visibly exhausted father, a wailing infant, a rogue pram rolling down the driveway.
Life moving on.
Sophie simply steps forward, intercepts the runaway pram, offers a knowing, empathetic smile to the harassed mother, and continues walking toward Angie's front door.
That brief interaction encapsulates the entire philosophical thesis of the source material. It transcends the specific narrative of a secret university romance and becomes a profound observation on the relentless, unsentimental, and ultimately healing cycle of time.
The cycle just continues.
Sophie observes that chaotic new family and reaches a state of complete emotional integration. She realizes that Pemberton Road is no longer a monument to her specific trauma. It is simply physical infrastructure housing the chaos of the next generation.
Yeah.
Those new babies will grow up, they will play in the same gardens, they will make their own catastrophic mistakes, and they will forge their own redemptions.
Mm.
The universe does not stop to mourn. Life simply, relentlessly continues to move forward.
And as she walks through Angie's front door, she enters a house vibrating with that exact life force. The text provides a final, triumphant tableau.
Inside the party.
Angie is physically frail, visibly altered by the brutal reality of her treatment, but she is undeniably alive. She has defied the grim statistics of her prognosis, seemingly sustained by sheer, stubborn willpower and the presence of her family.
The house is full of life.
The living room is a riot of noise. Jack is clumsily attempting to teach Sophie how to salsa dance to blaring Latin music. Indy is laughing, aggressively thrusting her hips at a completely bewildered and stunned Tom.
Perfect.
The physical space is overflowing with chaotic, overlapping conversations and uninhibited laughter. It is functioning exactly as a home is designed to function.
The integration of the past is complete. The children are secure, anchored, and preparing to launch themselves into the unknown trajectory of their adult lives. And Angie, sitting quietly on the sofa amidst the deafening noise of the party, observing the chaotic blending of these two once devastated tribes, finally achieves a state of profound peace.
She survived it.
She realizes that against all mathematical probability, she survived long enough to witness her children transition into adulthood. The radioactive trauma of the past has decayed. It has been fully metabolized, no longer acting as a source of toxic pain, but serving as the very bedrock, the complex foundational history of this massive, chaotic, irrevocably merged family unit.
The sheer scale of that emotional trajectory is staggering when you evaluate it from a distance. You look at the smoking crater of that New Year's Eve, the absolute destruction of trust, the collateral damage inflicted on innocent children, and the decade of bitter defensive posturing.
And then you look at where they are now.
And then you look at this living room echoing with salsa music and shared survival. It fundamentally rewires how you perceive the architecture of human resilience. It forces you to reevaluate the worst moments of your own history. It makes you wonder, what if the worst, most devastating betrayal of your entire life isn't the end of your story, but the exact catalyst required to teach you the true, staggering capacity of your own heart to forgive?